Chapter 1150. Elton looked at Amy and opened his mouth to argue. However, Amy did not give him a chance to speak. She looked at him and continued, "Look at your dirty hands. I'm afraid you haven't washed them for years, right? Even Ugly Duckling's little paws are cleaner than yours. And those dirty clothes, don't tell me you haven't changed your clothes since the winter of the year before last. But there was a warm summer in between. That must be because you were too lazy. Also, is it so difficult to wash your face every day? Look at how clean that grandpa's face is. That's why he has a wife." Elton took 3 steps back and clutched his chest. He felt as if he had been dealt a heavy blow. Father said that the cleaners brought us clean Aiden Square every day. It was very tiring and cold, so he and my sisters woke up early to prepare a delicious breakfast for everyone. Why would he think that you are dirty? Amy said to the crowd with a smile. Then, her gaze fixed on Elton, and she said with disdain, "But you are really dirty." Elton took 3 more steps back. He felt as if he could not breathe properly. Many of the cleaners had ashamed expressions on their faces. Indeed, Mr. Mag and these beautiful ladies had no responsibility to do these things. They woke up early for the cleaners and cooked breakfast for the cleaners as well as the customers in the restaurant, but they still weren't satisfied. And when these words came from the mouth of a little girl, it made everyone feel even more ashamed. They all looked at Meg gratefully. Old Jack looked at Elton and said seriously, "Elton, Mr. Meg has already done so much for us. How can you trouble him to add more work for you? Mr. Meg may not mind, but what about the people who come to this beautiful restaurant to eat? Are they willing to spend so much money to sit at the seats we just sat at? I don't want to be associated with your behavior." Old Jack turned to look at Meg and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Mr. Meg. If we have caused you trouble, you don't have to prepare breakfast for us in the future. This is not something you need to do in the first place." The other cleaners also stood up. Although they didn't say anything, they looked at Elton with disdain and a little apologetic. Realizing that he seemed to have angered the crowd, Elton looked away and coughed dryly. He squeezed out a smile and said, "I was just joking. You don't have to take it to heart. I'll just sit on the stairs and eat." After saying that, he immediately turned around and sat at the corner of the stairs. He held the bowl and picked up the spoon to eat the porridge. That tiny piece of meat had allowed him to taste the most delicious food in the world. How could he let it go? Meg glanced at Elton, then smiled at the cleaners and said, "Everyone continue eating. If it's not enough, there's more in the pot." Hearing this, the cleaners sat back down. "Grandpa Jack, you and your wife should hurry up and eat your breakfast. It won't taste good when it gets cold," Meg said to old Jack with a smile. "You're such a good person," old Jack said with a complicated expression. He brought the old lady to sit on the stairs at the side and began to eat the porridge. Restrained kindness. Mr. Mack is indeed a good person with a clear mind. Harrison glanced at the cleaners sitting on the stairs and looked at Meg with admiration. George nodded and sighed and said, "Yeah, Kraut's Bakery back then had to close down in less than half a month because it provided unlimited food for the homeless. Furthermore, the boss was beaten into a cripple by the homeless. He's also wandering the streets now. Wow, this porridge is too delicious." A cleaner picked up a spoon and scooped a spoonful of porridge into his mouth. The lean meat that melted in his mouth along with the porridge, as well as the unique texture of the century egg, brought about an incomparable, delicious experience. For a person who could only eat plain porridge or pancakes without fillings on a daily basis, a bowl of porridge with a meaty aroma was simply the best delicacy. After swallowing a mouthful of hot porridge, the warmth slid down his throat to his stomach before spreading outwards. His cold body quickly warmed up from the inside out. "It's so delicious. I've never eaten such delicious porridge before." Simple praises could be heard as the cleaners sat on the stairs and ate the porridge with lean meat and century egg. Their faces were filled with blissful smiles as they immersed themselves in the delicious food. The cold was dispelled by the hot porridge, and the tiredness disappeared as well. The delicious porridge filled their empty stomachs and turned into heat and energy that gradually filled their bodies. Looking at this scene, Meg smiled. Although he had never flaunted himself as a good person, It was undeniable that doing good deeds would indeed make one feel better. Yabamiya and the rest also had happy smiles on their faces. Although they woke up much earlier than usual, this feeling was still very good. Gulp. Harrison and George touched their stomachs at the same time, and their eyes landed on the big pot at the side. Father, I want to eat that porridge too. Amy raised her little hand and pointed at the big pot with a firm expression. A big bowl. All right, I'll get it for you. Meg nodded with a smile. He picked up a big bowl, scooped a bowl of porridge with lean meat and century egg for Amy, and placed it on the table at the side. Amy climbed onto the chair happily and began to eat the porridge with a spoon. Meow. Ugly Duckling ran over with the bowl in its mouth. It circled around under the chair and called out to Amy anxiously. You don't have to call me, Ugly Duckling. It's not time for breakfast yet. Amy looked down at Ugly Duckling and shook her head. Mr. Mac, we came especially early today. Can you let us try the new dish first? Harrison said to Meg with a smile. George was also looking at Meg with an expectant expression. At this time, a few more customers came one after another. When they saw the cleaners sitting in a row and smelled the tempting aroma, they all looked at Meg. It was simply too blissful to have a bowl of delicious porridge on such a cold day. I'm sorry, but business hours have not started yet. Please wait for a moment. This is the new dish launched today. You can order it when it's officially open later. Meg shook his head with a smile. There was no room for discussion at all. Harrison also knew Meg's temper and the restaurant's rules. When he saw Meg shake his head, he didn't insist anymore. He forcibly retracted his gaze from the cleaners and couldn't help but look at Amy, who was eating happily with a spoon. Little boss, is this porridge with lean meat and century egg not skinny? Harrison asked with a smile. I'll eat it for you to see. Amy scooped up a century egg and then bit it gently with her teeth. The century egg sunk in, and then her teeth loosened, and it returned to its original state. She bit down, loosened, and then chewed and swallowed it. She revealed a bright smile. Little boss, you're really skinny, Harrison murmured with a hint of resentment. Chapter 11:51. The customers arrived one after another and formed a long line at the entrance of the restaurant. Why do I have to go through this pain so early in the morning? I suddenly want to be a cleaner. Is this congee with pork and century egg really that delicious? Looks like I have to change my breakfast today. Looking at the cleaners eating the delicious hot congee on the stairs, the customers in the line felt a strong sense of discomfort and envy. A slightly plump cleaner finished the congee in his bowl and walked to the bucket with the bowl. He said hesitantly, Can I have another mouthful of congee? Of course. I prepare enough congee for everyone. It's enough even if everyone has another bowl. Meg smiled and nodded. He took the bowl and scooped another bowl for him. Congee was not very filling, not to mention people like them who were hungry. Thank you, the cleaner said gratefully. He carefully returned to the stairs with the bowl in his hands. Hearing Meg's words, many cleaners brought their bowls over and scooped another bowl of congee. It was their first time eating such delicious congee. If they could eat another bowl, it would be too blissful. Although the congee was delicious, the cleaners ate quickly. Not long after, they finished 2 bowls of congee. Old Jack and his wife helped to clean up the bowls and chopsticks and place them neatly on the table at the side. The cleaners expressed their gratitude to Meg and the rest. Their old faces were flushed with smiles. Burp. Elton burped. He had already eaten 3 bowls of congee. If it wasn't for the fact that he really couldn't eat anymore, he would have eaten another bowl. He casually placed the bowl on the table and looked at the congee with pork and century egg left in the big pot. His eyes lit up and he looked at Meg with a smile. That, Mr. Mac, we've already eaten this congee. You don't want any more, right? Why don't you give it all to me? I'll take it back for lunch. It'll be a pity if you throw it away. The rest of the congee is our breakfast. It won't be thrown away. Meg took the lid and put on the big pot. He looked at Elton and said calmly, I'm not as noble as you think. You don't have to degrade yourself so lowly. We're just ordinary people. My daughter uses the same bowl and eats from the same pot as you. So do we. The cleaners who were about to leave looked at Meg and the cute little girl who was licking the bottom of the big bowl. Their eyes suddenly became a little wet. The customers standing at the side thought. They originally minded the cleaners had used the bowls and chopsticks, but now they felt a little ashamed and looked to Meg. Elton was stunned for a moment. He felt that the atmosphere was not quite right. He did not expect that a rich restaurant owner like Meg would eat from the same pot as them. His little plan failed. He awkwardly retracted his hand and smiled. If that's the case, then I won't think about it. You guys eat, you guys eat. After saying that, he took 2 quick steps, picked up his things, and left quickly. Mr. Meg, Elton is just like that. He likes to take advantage of small things, but he's not too bad. I hope you don't take it to heart. I'll talk to him later. Old Jack looked at Meg apologetically. He was the first person to get to know Meg. He felt a little apologetic that something like this had happened. It's okay. Meg smiled and shook his head. Then he looked at the crowd and said, It's still 6:30 tomorrow morning. Remember to come on time. After the cleaners expressed their gratitude, they picked up their tools and left. There was still cleaning work waiting for them. However, after eating this piping hot congee with pork and century egg, they felt warm all over. They also felt more energetic all of a sudden. They even had more energy to sweep the floor. Yabamiya carried the remaining half pot of congee with pork and century egg into the restaurant. Everyone cleared the bowls and chopsticks and entered the restaurant as well. I heard that Mr. Mac provided breakfast for the cleaners in Aiden Square. Is it new product? Yeah, I came early and happened to see it. Those cleaners were eating happily. One look and I can tell that it's delicious. Mr. Mac is really a good person. I have to try this congee with pork and century egg this morning. I want to see what kind of skin it is. The customers arrived one after another. The news of the new product and Meg providing breakfast for the cleaners spread quickly and caused a lot of discussion. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, Meg and the rest breakfast was indeed the congee with pork and century egg that was left in the bucket. Yabamiya's mouth moved as she swallowed a mouthful of congee. She said in surprise, this congee is really delicious. It melts in the mouth, and the texture is sticky. The fragrance of the meat has completely blended into the congee. And the century egg doesn't taste like duck eggs at all. It's so bouncy. It's so delicious. The others were also pleasantly surprised as they ate the congee with pork and century egg. It was even more delicious than they had imagined. The bouncy and beautiful century egg brought about a very wonderful experience. Father, can I have a youtiao? I think it should taste very good with this congee. Amy scooped another bowl of congee and raised her little hand. Who else wants youtiao? Tell me your name, Meg said as he stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Then I want one too. Mia raised her hand. I want to eat too. Anna raised her little hand. Meow. Ugly Duckling tried its best to raise one of its little paws. No, you don't want to. Amy pressed its paw back down. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy aggrievedly. Its aggrieved look made one's heart ache a little. Can't you wait to grow up already? I heard from Father that the most suitable weight for roast duck is 5 kilograms. Amy lowered her head and looked at it seriously. Ugly Duckling's eyes widened, and it immediately shook its head like a rattle drum. It retreated to Anna's side and hid behind her with a whoosh. Outside the restaurant, there was a long line of customers again. This corner of the deserted square seemed very lively. Please make way. Right at this moment, a black horse-drawn carriage drove over and stopped in front of the restaurant. Adams walked out of the carriage and jumped down. He said to the coachman, "Take the thing out." "Yes." The coachman answered and went into the carriage. Soon, he carried out a long plaque covered by a red cloth carefully. "What's this?" The customers in the line looked curiously at the long plaque that the coachman was carrying. What was this knight going to do? Adams tidied up his light armor and then walked to the restaurant's door. He knocked on the door and loudly said, "Mr. Mac, please open the door. I have something to pass to you." Meg, who was coming out of the kitchen with a plate of fried youtiao, heard that. He placed the youtiao on the table and gestured for the ladies to eat first. He walked to the door and opened it. He looked a little puzzled when he saw Adams standing in front of the door and the coachman carrying a long plaque behind him. Chapter 1152. Adams was wearing a set of bright gold and silver armor. This getup reminded Mag very quickly that he was the first customer to order Buddha jumps over the wall the day before yesterday. He even appeared very excited after he finished eating. Thinker, handwritten text version. Net. However, the day before yesterday, he still had a head of thick hair. Today, his hair was so short that he almost looked bald. Only a little bit of short hair could be seen. Indeed, some people look bright and beautiful on the surface, but in reality, they're already bald inside their wigs. Meg was deep in thought. However, why was he bringing people and carrying an unknown object so early in the morning? What was he planning to do? Mr. Mack, I am here to give you a memorial tablet, Adams said a little agitatedly. Memorial tablet? Meg raised his eyebrows. Was he here to cause trouble early in the morning? Wasn't it too much to give him a memorial tablet? When the customers heard that, they all looked sideways. This young man looked quite handsome, but from what he said, could it be that he was here to cause trouble? No, I was wrong. It's a plaque. It's a plaque of gratitude. Adams quickly realized his slip of the tongue and quickly shook his head. He turned around and tore off the red cloth on the plaque. A shiny golden plaque appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The shiny pure gold was very dazzling. Master of Hair Growth. Harrison, who was at the front of the line, blurted out. Meg looked at the shiny golden plaque and the 4 big words made of pure gold. His mouth was wide open, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. The regulars in the line looked at the short hair that had just appeared on Adam's head and then looked at the shiny golden plaque. They suddenly understood something. I really can't accept it. I really can't accept it. Meg shook his head and said, he was running a restaurant. What master of hair growth? Where was he supposed to hang this kind of plaque? What if people went astray in the future and gave him silk banners that said, medicine helps the world, unparalleled miracle doctor, or gynecology sage? Your extraordinary creation and invention changed my life. This plaque is just a small token of my appreciation. If you can't accept it, then no one else in this world can. Please accept it, Adams said with a sincere expression. He had commissioned someone to make it yesterday and delivered it personally this morning to express his gratitude. Mr. Mack, just accept it. Look at this plaque. It's shiny and bright. It'll be very eye-catching if you hang it on the door. It'll help increase the restaurant's popularity, Harrison said with a chuckle. That's right, Mr. Mack. He's also doing this to thank you. You've done a good deed, so just accept it. Soon, other customers also tried to persuade him. Speaking of which, should I make a plaque for Mr. Mack that reads Master of Midwifery to express my gratitude? George looked at the plaque thoughtfully. Please accept it, Mr. Mack, Adams said sincerely. Seeing Adams' sincere expression and listening to the other customers' persuasion, Meg pondered for a while. It wasn't appropriate for him to be in a stalemate here, so he nodded reluctantly. He looked at Adams and said, since you're so sincere, I can't reject it. However, although I'll accept this plaque, I won't hang it up. I'll keep it well. Adams was slightly disappointed when he heard that Meg wasn't going to hang it up. However, he quickly smiled and nodded. All right, I'll let Mr. Mack make the decision. It's fine as long as you can accept my sincerity. You're welcome. Meg nodded slightly and heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. If Adams insisted that he hang the plaque on the spot, Mamie's would have to change its name to Mamie Hair Growth Hall in the future. I'll get him to bring the plaque in for you. It's a little heavy. Adams stepped aside to let the coachman pass. It's all right. I'll bring it in myself. Meg reached out to take the plaque from the coachman. This plaque seemed to be made of gold, and it was indeed quite heavy. If it was hung outside, it would probably be stolen the next day. Then, I'll go and eat first. I still have to send Amy to school later. With that, he turned and entered the restaurant with the plaque. You could go back first, Adams said to the coachman, while he went straight to the back of the line and lined up. So young Master Adams' hair grew because he ate Mr. Mack's Buddha jumps over the wall. I wonder if his sudden breakthrough has anything to do with Mr. Mack. In the line, a middle-aged man's gaze followed Adams all the way to the back of the line. He seemed to be deep in thought. If I tell Master Charney about this, there should be some new breakthroughs in the business that didn't go through the previous time. I heard that he was also troubled by hair loss when he was young. Meg went out and then came in with a shiny golden plaque. He immediately attracted the attention of all the ladies who were eating at the table. Father, what's that? Amy asked curiously. Hair Growth Master? What kind of title is that? Mia read the words on the plaque and asked curiously. Seeing that everyone was curious, Meg explained helplessly. A customer gave it to me. He said that I changed his life, so he specially gave me a plaque to express his gratitude. Then, why don't you hang it outside for everyone to see? Anna asked curiously. Isn't it a little strange to hang the plaque of a hair growth master in a restaurant? Barbara looked at the plaque. Yes, we are a restaurant, after all, and it's not good to reject a customer's goodwill. However, this plaque is indeed not suitable to be hung at the door. Meg nodded in agreement. He carried the plaque and walked towards the stairs as he said, You guys eat first. I'll bring the plaque upstairs. Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining the title of Hair Growth Master and triggering a hidden mission. Hair loss will cause great harm to a person's physical and mental health. As a candidate for the god of cookery, you must have the world in your heart and save those who are troubled by hair loss so that they can have beautiful hair again and welcome a new life. Please help 30 people with hair loss to get rid of their hair loss problems within 3 days. Mission success. You have received a recipe for steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Mission failure. Host will become bald, and it will be irreversible. Mission progress. 6/30. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. Fuck! Meg almost blurted out. System, your punishment for failure is too vicious, isn't it? What the hell is bald? Meg rolled his eyes and said in his mind. Saving a bald person is better than building a 7-story pagoda. All the best, host. The system encouraged before disappearing completely. Chapter 1153. Meg resisted the urge to hang the signboard with Master of Hair Growth at the door. He threw the signboard to a corner on the 3rd floor, adjusted his mood, and went downstairs. After breakfast, he sent Amy to school. When he went out, Meg specially observed the proportion of baldness among the customers in the queue. At a glance, people with hair loss who could be seen everywhere were rarely seen in the queue. Other than Adams, there were only 2 middle-aged customers. Hair loss is really depressing. Meg sighed as he pedaled his bicycle slowly with Amy on it. When they passed by the job agency, the boss, Chris, was watering the plants at the door. Morning, Uncle Bird's nest. Amy greeted him with a smile. Morning, little boss, Chris replied helplessly as he looked up. During this period of time, Mamie Restaurant had become the most popular restaurant in the entire Chaos City. He had also taken some time out to eat there once. Although the job agency had brought him quite a bit of income, it was still very painful for him to fork out a few hundred or even a few thousand copper coins for a meal. Hence, he had only gone once. Meg also nodded at Chris with a smile. His gaze stopped on his head for a while. What nice bald head. It would be perfect if he could go and eat Buddha jumps over the wall. Ding. Warning system, do not take the initiative to solicit customers. Otherwise, it will be regarded as a violation, and the mission will be deemed a failure. Before Meg could say anything, the system's voice had already sounded in Meg's mind. System, aren't you going overboard? Good wine doesn't need to be afraid of deep alleys. Basic advertising is in line with the trade rules. What right do you have to stop me from advertising? Meg raised his eyebrows. Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, how can you solicit customers on the street? This will seriously lower your status and is not conducive to cultivating the god of cookery's character. You are discriminating against those ladies who use their bodies to earn money, Meg said sternly. What did they do wrong? Aren't they also working people? I remember back then, there was a small alley where we lived. There were many young ladies living in the alley. They often stood at the door to enjoy the cool air. They were very hospitable and always invited me to their houses to play. They were such nice girls. Later, because there were too many people who wanted to raise the city's standard, the alleys were gone, and so were the warm and hospitable ladies. Don't you think that's right? Meg continued. Isn't hospitality a compliment in the human language system? Then why were they chased away? Searching for information. There was no required information in the database. The question is unsolvable. Enter learning mode. System learning. Meg was still waiting for the system's answer when a line of words silently floated through his mind. What a studious system. Meg raised his eyebrows and wondered how long it would take for the system to come out this time. Uncle Bird's Nest, why don't you come to our restaurant and have a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall? In that case, will your hair grow back? Before Meg could speak, Amy asked curiously. My hair will grow back. Chris's eyes instantly lit up. He looked at Amy in surprise and said, Little boss, is what you said true? After eating that Buddha jumps over the wall, my hair will grow back? Yes, there are already a few hairless uncles and big brothers who came to our restaurant to eat Buddha jumps over the wall and had their hair grow back. Amy nodded and added, However, Uncle Bird's Nest, you have to come at night. Buddha jumps over the wall is only available at night. Okay. I'll definitely come. Chris nodded hurriedly. If there was something in this world that he cared about more than making money, it would probably be his thinning hair. Seeing the Mediterranean Sea slowly growing bigger, he protected the remaining golden hair on his head like it was a treasure. Suddenly hearing that there was a way to regrow his hair was really a surprise to him. Meg looked at Amy in surprise. He didn't expect that Amy had already completed the transaction before he even opened his mouth. From the looks of it, this little brat really had a business mind for precise marketing. Seeing how Chris couldn't wait to go to Amy's, this customer was basically included in the hair regrowth package. Meg pedaled his bicycle and continued to ride in the direction of the school. Holding Amy's hand, he walked into the school. It was indeed a place for intellectuals. Meg immediately saw a few bald heads and a few heads that were trying to probe the edges of the bald heads. Especially in the direction of the physics faculty, a few young people with receding hairlines were fiercely debating about something. As they shook their heads, their hair fluttered in the wind. The scene was quite shocking. This is really a rich resource bank. Meg's eyes lit up. It was a pity that there was no computer science faculty. Otherwise, all he had to do was run to the entrance of the school and shout, and the students and teachers of the computer science faculty would probably fill up the cafeteria. A backup plan had already appeared in Meg's mind. As soon as they entered the magic lab, Crassus looked at Amy with a smile and said, After my discussion with Julian, if little Amy wants to take a break so much, we will also give you a long break. 5 days before and 5 days after Peace Day, for a total of 10 days. Really? Amy's eyes lit up. Of course it's true. What has Master ever lied to you? Crassus nodded with a smile. Thank you, Master Crassus. Amy threw herself into Crassus' arms, then turned to Meg and said happily, Father, I can take a break too. Yes, Amy can take a break too. Meg smiled. It seemed that Crassus and Julian still cared about Amy's wishes. Although she couldn't take a 30-day break like ordinary students, a 10-day break was still very rare. When they returned to the restaurant, it was time for the morning business. The news of Adams giving the plaque in the morning had already spread. The rumor that the Buddha jumps over the wall could help with hair growth was verified again, and it had become a hot topic. Who didn't have 1 or 2 people who were suffering from hair loss? Since there was such a special medicine, even if it was a little expensive, it was still very recommended. After the morning business ended, the sun was shining brightly. Meg took the recliner out of the door, laid it down, and was about to take a nap under the sun. Mr. Meg, I hope I didn't disturb your sunbathing? At this moment, a gentle and pleasant voice sounded. Meg opened his eyes and sat up. He looked at Gloria with a smile and shook his head. It's okay, I just laid down. Miss Gloria, is there anything you need from me? Yes, there's something I want to hear Mr. Meg's opinion on, so I abruptly came to disturb you. Gloria nodded. Then let's sit over there and talk. I'll go get a pot of tea. Meg got up and gestured for Gloria to sit at the side while he turned around and went into the restaurant. Come, wonderful book house. Chapter 1154. A pot of black tea was brewing on a small stove, and the warm winter sun shone down. Meg leaned comfortably on the wooden chair and looked at Gloria with a smile. Miss Gloria, what do you want to talk to me about? It's like this. Because of my family, I'm still a director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. But 2 days ago, my grandfather suddenly came to me and said that my Uncle Cyril wants to remove me at the end of the year celebration in a few days. He's already contacted a lot of directors. Although I don't care about this so-called director position, My grandfather said that if I can't keep the director position with my own ability, then I'll be eliminated from the list of candidates. And if I can stay, the part of the family business that was previously allocated to me will become my permanent property. What do you think I should do? Gloria looked at Meg helplessly. This is really a drama about the rich and powerful. Meg sighed in his heart. Although he was born into a rich and powerful family in his previous life, because he was the only child, there was no drama about fighting for family property. Because of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce, other than Gloria, Meg didn't have a good impression of family Moreton. The powerful president and Lou Adu Cyril, who couldn't afford to pay, weren't good people in his eyes. In the beginning, he made a great ambition to overthrow the Aiden Chamber of Commerce and reset those unequal rules. Young Mistress Shear was one of the chess pieces that he had invested in this game, while young Mistress Gloria, who was gradually showing her talent in business and was starting to test for the right to inherit the Moreton family, was his second backup. Of course, when he decided to help Gloria, he didn't think too much about it. He just thought of it as a little help to a friend and an angel investor. Now, suede clothing was developing rapidly. Under Meg's suggestion, the production line was improving day by day. The low efficiency of individual labor was evolving to the efficient division of labor in the assembly line. The productivity was also increasing. They had obtained a piece of land in the north of the city and were preparing to build a new garment factory. Gloria's talent and judgment in business operations won Meg's admiration. However, she was a little immature when it came to handling daily affairs. Judging from the change in your grandfather's attitude, there should be some changes in his views regarding the successor. If you can complete this mission, perhaps you can truly compete with your uncle on the same level as him. However, since he dared to bring this matter up directly with your grandfather, he must have contacted many of the directors who can vote. Moreover, he has been the sole heir of family Moreton for many years. There should be more people who think that he will become the family Moreton successor. Therefore, there's not much point in persuading the directors now. Your grandfather may be able to influence some of the directors and make them stand on the same level. However, in just a few days, you won't be able to produce results that will convince the directors. Meg analyzed. Then what should I do? Gloria stared at Meg and asked. It was because of this that she felt helpless and came to see Meg. Perhaps you can go and see Miss Hill. There are 4 major families in the Aiden Chamber of Commerce. Other than family Moreton, the Buffett family is the most powerful family. If she can stand on your side, perhaps the result will be different. Meg said, Miss Hill? Gloria was slightly surprised. She shook her head and said, Miss Hill is on bad terms with my grandfather because of the election. She definitely won't stand on my side. How do you know if you don't try? Meg said with a smile as he poured a cup of black tea and placed it in front of Gloria. Gloria looked at Meg's encouraging eyes. After a moment of silence, she nodded hard and said, Yes, I will try. Even if I fail, I have to at least give it a try. After drinking a cup of black tea, Gloria left. Meg drank tea alone for a while. He didn't feel sleepy anymore. He put away the tea set and rode out on his bicycle. He hadn't received any news from the elves for 2 days. Looks like the night elves aren't doing well. I wonder if Phyllis and the others are doing well. Meg walked out of the alley and changed back into his own clothes. He frowned. He had just spent a lot of gold coins to exchange for the latest news. The wind forest had surrounded the catacombs where the night elves were. The attack and defense of the catacombs had already been fought several times. Although the night elves had the advantage of the terrain, the wind forest had more soldiers and powerhouses. Now, they were completely relying on Irina's powerful individual strength to support the last line of defense of the night elves. Although the gnomes had lent the catacombs to the night elves, they had no intention of intervening in this war. They hadn't given any help to the night elves. The catacombs were now like an isolated island. All the forces had basically assumed that this rebellion would be quelled soon. Even with Irina's guidance, the night elves were still too weak to shake the rule of the wind forest. I had to find a way to give Irina more help. Meg muttered to himself. He rode his bicycle back and stopped at the blacksmith shop next door. When he entered the blacksmith shop, the sound of blacksmithing came from behind. Mr. Mac, why are you here? Meg had just walked to the door of the forging room when Mabai looked up and saw him. He was a little surprised. About the cannon, I thought of something recently, so I want to talk to you about it, Meg said with a smile. Mabai's eyes lit up when he heard that. He put the heavy hammer in his hand aside and said with a smile, Okay, then let's talk outside. I also have some questions that I want to ask you. According to Mr. Meg's previous suggestion, I made cannon. But for some reason, the cannonballs often explode inside the barrel, causing damage to the barrel. It can't be fired and can't cause any damage. Also, the cannonball's power can't be increased within the limited volume. I estimated that a cannonball exploding at close range can only cause a fatal threat to a level 3 magic beast, Mabai said with a frown as he spread out a blueprint. Meg took a few glances at the blueprint and asked, Where's the barrel? In the workshop outside the city. I was worried that there would be danger during the experiment, so I built a workshop on a plain about 5 kilometers away from Chaos City, Mabai answered. If it's convenient, bring me there in the afternoon. The cannon has very high requirements for the barrel. The reason for the explosion can only be found after looking at it. I also have some ideas about how to increase the cannonball's power, but let's talk about it after we see the cannon, Meg said to Mabai. All right, then I'll bring Mr. Mac there in the afternoon. Mabai quickly nodded. Chapter 1155. After lunch, Meg followed Mabai to the outskirts of the city. Mabai's cannon workshop was built on a plain 10 miles away from the city. The surroundings were desolate, and the yellow soil was everywhere. A yellow soil courtyard stood out from the rest. Mabai stopped the horse-drawn carriage and looked at Mag with a smile as he said, I bought this entire plot of land, so no one will come here on a regular basis, so I don't have to worry about conducting any experiments. It's pretty good. Back in the day, the pioneers of 2 bombs and 1 star also traded for the world nuclear power in such a harsh environment. Meg stood on the shaft of the carriage and looked around. The seriously deserted plain did feel like the Great Northwest. Come in. Mabai tied the horse and opened the big lock on the courtyard door. He pushed the door open and walked in. Meg jumped off the carriage and followed him into the courtyard. As soon as they entered the courtyard, the smell of gunpowder hit their nostrils. There were piles of iron everywhere in the courtyard, and there were 2 cannons in the corner. They looked a little like the Redcoat cannon. Mr. Mac, look, these are the cannons I made. These 2 were made 2 days ago. I made some improvements. The barrels were damaged before, so they're now scrap metal. Mabai led Meg to the cannons in the corner. Although Meg graduated from mechanical design, he did not study firearms manufacturing. He did not have any in-depth research on high-grade cannons. He could only give some suggestions on the manufacturing process of these 2 cannons from a mechanical perspective. He changed the quenching method to increase the heat resistance of the barrel, polish the inside of the barrel, and thicken the barrel. Furthermore, Mag had further improved the structure of the cannon. It had changed from the primitive firing mode to a firing mode with a firing mode. When he was in class, his teacher used a World War II German cannon as a case study. He still remembered the blueprint and parameters. As for whether the craftsmanship could reach the standard, that was Mabai's problem. One exquisite design. Mr. Mac, you are a genius. Mabai looked at the new blueprint and exclaimed, I'm just standing on the shoulders of my predecessors. Meg shook his head with a smile. Is there someone else researching cannons? Mabai asked as he looked at Meg curiously. For now, it should only be you and me. Meg shook his head. Mr. Mac is actually willing to show me such a complete concept. I really don't know how to thank you. Mabai held the blueprint and couldn't put it down. Meg looked at Mabai with a serious expression and said, I can give you the blueprint for free, but I want to make a deal. Once this cannon is successfully developed, you can only accept my order, and you can't give the blueprint to a third person. Mr. Mac wants cannons too. Mabai was stunned and looked at Meg in surprise. If the peace treaty can't be signed, the world may fall into chaos again. I'm just an ordinary person, so I need to have some means of self-defense, Meg said with a smile. Is that so? Don't worry. With Mr. Mac's culinary skills, there will definitely be many people who will protect you. Besides, aren't there Mr. Crassus and Mr. Julian? Malbai smiled and said, "But I agree to all your conditions. You just have to tell me how much you want in the future. My goal is that evil dragon. I don't want to make money from cannons." Meg nodded slightly. He chose to give the cannon technology to Malbai because of this. "In addition to cannons, I want to customize a batch of landmines from you." Meg continued. An hour later, Meg returned to the restaurant in Malbai's horse-drawn carriage. Malbai returned to the workshop and said to Lulu, who was swinging her hammer vigorously, "Blockhead, stop forging. Go back earlier today. Stop this batch of orders first. From tomorrow onwards, follow me to the workshop outside the city. There's a new batch of orders that need to be done urgently." "Hee okay." Lulu wiped her sweat and then forged the piece of metal in her hand into a sword embryo before putting down the hammer and leaving. "Is what you said true?" Adam's hair grew because he ate a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall from that restaurant. Adams even specially gave him a plaque today. In Gould Manor, Charney looked at the middle-aged man with a shocked expression. "Yes, I saw young Master Adams give that plaque to Mr. Mac from Mamie's with my own eyes this morning. The words Master of Hair Growth were written on it." The middle-aged man quickly nodded and then muttered, "Also, I heard another piece of news. That Buddha jumps over the wall can not only help with hair growth, but it also has the effect of strengthening those knights. Yesterday, a first-tier knight broke through to the second tier after drinking a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. You're saying that Adams could break through to the fourth tier in one night because he drank that Buddha jumps over the wall?" Charney raised his voice and ridiculously said, "How can there be such a soup in this world? Wouldn't it be a miracle medicine? Seems like you must have never heard of Mamie's. That is a rather legendary restaurant. Mr. Mac's food is not only delicious, but also has some unusual magical effects. For example, the tofu pudding, which is regarded as a holy item for beauty by the women in Chaos City. Not only can it moisturize the skin and remove wrinkles, but it can also remove some scars and spots that even magic casters can't do anything about. The effects of this Buddha jumps over the wall have already been verified by a few customers who have eaten it, so it shouldn't be wrong," that middle-aged man said with a smile. He had an inexplicable confidence when he talked about Mr. Mac. "Mamie's. I didn't expect there to be such a magical restaurant," Charney said thoughtfully. Yesterday's incident had really embarrassed him. However, since things had already come to this, and he had already made a promise of 10 years, he didn't regret giving Adams another 10 years. He didn't want Adams to hate him for the rest of his life. The family Moreton was a good example. He could still afford to wait for another 10 years. However, he was indeed very curious about how Adams made his hair grow. It was just that the situation yesterday was too awkward, and he couldn't bring himself to ask Adams. However, this gentleman had provided him with a very valuable piece of information. It was never too late to grow hair, no matter what age one was. Charney reached out to shake hands with that middle-aged man with a smile. "Thank you for providing me with an important piece of information. I remember that you talked about a collaboration with my secretary previously, right? You were talking to me about your plan? All right, everyone, go back earlier today." Kreese urged the employees to knock off before it was even 5 p.m. What's wrong with the miser today? Why is he letting us knock off so early? The employees couldn't help but mumble as they watched Kreese rush away. Chapter 1156. At the entrance of the Mercenary Guild, a young knight showed off his biceps to his teammates and punched the testing machine at the side. Bang! There was a muffled sound. A red line rose slowly and stopped at the second-level position. Did you see that? I ate a serving of Buddha jumps over the wall the day before yesterday, and then I broke through. Look, I am a genuine second-level knight now, the young knight said excitedly. Damn, you really broke through? Really? You can even break through? You are the person who was deemed as a loser by the captain. This machine isn't broken, right? The mercenaries were stunned for a moment and looked at the red line with astonishment. Some of them even checked the testing machine. It's true. I haven't told anyone about this yet, the young knight said with certainty. He then turned to look at the scarred knight who was standing at the side and said with a smile, Boss, can you bring me along for the next mission? I have been sweeping the floor for 3 months. When you have stabilized your realm, you can go on missions with us. The scarred knight looked at the red line and turned to leave. Yay! The young knight clenched his fist excitedly. He finally made it. Boss, where are we going to eat tonight? The mercenaries asked as they followed him. Mamis, the scarred knight said calmly, but his eyes lit up with passion. Are we going to eat that Buddha jumps over the wall too? Can we really break through after eating it? The mercenaries' eyes lit up when they heard that, and they started to ask the young knight about the Buddha jumps over the wall. The magical effects of Buddha jumps over the wall quickly spread in the hair loss circle and night circle. Regardless of whether it was true or not, it still aroused the desire of many people to check it out. Oh my God, Mr. Mac's business is so good that it's simply inhumane. Chris thought he had arrived quite early, but when he saw the long line of more than 200 people at the entrance, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Looking ahead, Chris could see that there were people wearing the uniforms of the Grey Temple and the city, Lord's Castle everywhere. He didn't think too much about it and went straight to the end of the line. For the sake of his hair, what's the big deal? A luxurious horse-drawn carriage stopped at the entrance of the restaurant. The coachman opened the door, and Charney walked out. He was stunned to see the long line at the entrance, and asked in surprise, "Why are there so many people?" You might not know this, but Amy's is now the most popular restaurant in Chaos City. There are hundreds of people lining up to eat there every day, and business has always been booming. The middle-aged man who had previously informed him of the news walked out and said with a smile, "Sir, we're a little late. Let's go to the back and line up." Line up? Charney frowned, shook his head, and said, "I never wait for anyone. How much does it cost to enter directly? Pay the money and we can go in directly, or we can queue at the front." "Io, you can't do that." The middle-aged man quickly tugged at Charney's sleeve and nervously said, "According to the rules of this restaurant, you have to line up if you want to eat in the restaurant. If you cut the line, you will be blacklisted and you won't be able to enter in advance even if you pay. There are so many rules in this restaurant. Could it be that they have someone backing them? Even I can't cut the line?" Charney frowned and said with displeasure. The middle-aged man softly said, "Look, the two people at the front of the line. The one on the left with a white beard is the Lord of Fire, Crassus. The one on the right is the Lord of Ice, Julian. Look further back. That's the Deputy Lord of the Grey Temple. The lady in the middle on the left is the City Lord's daughter, and the one behind her is the City Lord's wife. Further back. All right, let's queue up." Charney interrupted him with a complicated expression. He alighted from the horse-drawn carriage and walked towards the back of the line. He saw many familiar faces in that line, and each of them had a higher status and power than the other. He really couldn't cut the line. What kind of freaking restaurant was this? Even the City Lord's wife, who rarely went out, was in the line. Furthermore, this boss was really something. There were so many big shots lining up outside, but he just closed the door and made them wait. As long as one was from the Norland continent, they would have heard of the rumors about those two legendary great magic casters. Mr. Mac's daughter is the disciple of Lord Crassus and Lord Julian, the middle-aged man added. They really have two powerful backers, Charney lamented. With the protection of these two great gods, no one would dare to create trouble here. Ding! Yabamiya opened the door and hung a notice on the door before going back in. Hair Care Day activity. The restaurant will be selling 25 servings of Buddha jumps over the wall to customers with hair loss problems. Please show your hair loss symptoms to the waiter when you order. The customer standing in the front row read it out loud. Hair Care Day? What kind of festival is that? Why haven't I heard of it before? Mr. Mac is too heartwarming, isn't he? I was worried that I wouldn't be able to eat it today. Isn't this a little unfair to people like us who don't have hair loss? If that's the case, Buddha jumps over the wall can really make hair regrow. That's too awesome. The customers started discussing when they heard that. Those who came for the Buddha jumps over the wall were elated. They were worried that they wouldn't be able to eat it. Seems like this Buddha jumps over the wall is quite popular. Charney suddenly became nervous. He craned his neck to look in front and counted how many bald heads there were in his heart. "Father, why are you here?" Just then, a voice sounded from the side. Charney was stunned. He turned to look at Adams, who had suddenly appeared beside him, and smiled awkwardly. However, he immediately pointed to the middle-aged businessman behind him and said, "We are here to discuss business. I heard that this restaurant is good, so I came over to try it." "Adams, why are you here too?" "I often come to this restaurant to eat, and I plan to eat here tonight," Adams said with a smile. Charney smiled and said, "I see. Then eat with us. We haven't had a meal together for some time. I won't disturb your business discussion, right?" Adams was a little hesitant. "It's all right, young Master Adams. We have already discussed it. It's my honor to be able to eat together," that middle-aged man said with a smile. "All right then. I will line up behind you." Adams nodded and stood behind them. "Welcome to Mamie's," Meg said with a smile as he opened the restaurant's door at 5 o'clock sharp. The customers walked in one after another and looked at the messages that kept popping up in the omniscient door. There were customers who were affected by different degrees of hair loss, and a smile appeared on his face. He then glanced at the system learning message that kept popping up in his mind, and his smile became even brighter. Chapter 11:57. The effect of the notice on Hair Care Day was very obvious. It gave the hair loss customers who were originally on the fence a reassurance pill. Although it was a bit painful to spend 10,000 copper coins, compared to the rebirth of beautiful hair, it was nothing. "Miss Mia, look at my hair loss. My hairline has receded by half a finger." "Miss Mia, that's nothing. Look at the top of my head. I can even raise fishes." "Miss Mia, look at my bald head. Isn't it big and round?" The customers began to show off their methods to prove that they were really losing their hair. Yabamia was stunned. Some people looked normal, but half of their hair might be fake. The 25 bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall that were reserved for hair loss patients were quickly sold out. Meg made 2 pots of Buddha jumps over the wall today. The remaining bowls were served on a first-come, first-served basis. I heard that you have a type of soup that can increase one's strength greatly after drinking it. Is there really such a soup? Give me 8 or 10 bowls first." A rough-looking knight with a big beard sat down and looked at Mia. Yabamia flipped open the menu and placed it in front of the knight. She smiled and said, "Our restaurant only has 1 bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. However, I'm not sure if it can increase one's strength greatly after drinking it. This is the menu. You can take a look at it. Each person can only buy 1 bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. If you want, I can order it for you." "Only 1 bowl?" Lev frowned and looked at the menu. Buddha jumps over the wall cost 10,000 copper coins. Lev blinked and made sure that he didn't count 2 zeros too much. He looked up at Mia and said, "Is there a mistake in the menu?" "There is no mistake in the menu." Mia shook her head. Erm. Lev touched his pocket and revealed an awkward expression. He hesitated and said, "Can I buy half a bowl?" Mia shook her head. "Sorry, this restaurant can't sell half a serving of food." Lev's expression changed. He only had about 5,000 copper coins in his pocket. Who would carry so much money with them when they went out for a meal? Furthermore, he had just returned from a mercenary mission and heard about this from a guild. He had been stuck at level 5 for 4 years and had no hope of breaking through, so he wanted to give it a try immediately. "Then, can I buy on credit here? I'll leave this sword here, and I'll come and get it tomorrow." Lev thought for a while, took off his sword, and looked at Mia. "I'm sorry, but Mamie's only accepts cash. We don't accept credit or collateral." Mia shook her head and said with a smile, "Sure, you can take a look at the other dishes on the menu. They are also very delicious." If this was another restaurant, Lev would have been furious by now. However, this waitress had a smile on her face the whole time, and her expression and speech were very pleasant. Not only did he not get angry, but he also felt guilty that he did not bring enough money and cause trouble for her. Lev reluctantly retracted his gaze from the Buddha jumps over the wall and looked at the other dishes on the menu. Then, he casually ordered a portion of red braised pork and a small portion of grilled fish. "Miss Mia, we want 6 servings of Buddha jumps over the wall." The young knight who was bragging to his teammates at the entrance of the guild smiled and waved his hand. "Oh my God, this Buddha jumps over the wall costs 10,000 copper coins per serving." A team member casually flipped open the menu and looked at the price tag. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. When the other mercenaries heard this, they also stretched their heads over and looked at the price tag. All of them revealed looks of astonishment. Their mercenary group could only be considered as a small mercenary group. They usually accepted missions that were not very dangerous and difficult. Therefore, their commission was naturally not high. Moreover, most of them loved wine and would usually go to the gambling den to play a few rounds. It was already good enough that they had some money for wine. How could they take out so much money to drink a bowl of soup, even if it could increase their strength? The leader of a mercenary group looked at the menu and hesitated. Haha, today is my treat to celebrate my successful breakthrough. Everyone can order whatever you want to eat. Every dish in this restaurant is the best delicacy, the young knight said with a smile. Bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall were served to the customers. The restaurant was filled with a wonderful aroma. Did my hair grow out a little? Oh my God, my hair grew out. I broke through. The alopecia patients and knights exclaimed from time to time in the restaurant. Although the restaurant prohibited noise, most of the customers could still smile or give their blessings for such a happy event. Another one broke through. This Buddha jumps over the wall can really help people break through. Lev stretched his neck and looked around. He did not even care about the delicious red braised pork in front of him. He was surprised and anxious. Can you leave a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall for me? I will go back to get the money now. I will be back soon, Lev said sincerely as he raised his hand to signal Mia to come over. I'm sorry, sir. Today's Buddha jumps over the wall is sold out. If you want to eat it, please come over earlier tomorrow night, Mia said with a smile. It's sold out. Lev's eyes widened. This is a dish that costs 10,000 copper coins per bowl. It's sold out in such a short time? How rich are these fellows? Yes, please enjoy your meal. Mia nodded and walked to the next customer. Adams, can you help me take a look and see if my hair has grown out? A little? Charney moved his head toward Adams agitatedly. Yes, your hair has grown out a little. Adams nodded with a smile as he looked at the little hairs on Charney's bald head. That's great. I'm finally going to have hair again. Charney clenched his fists excitedly. His face was filled with ecstasy as he hugged Adams and patted his back. Then he stood up and hugged the businessman who came with him with a bright smile on his face. Adams looked at Charney in shock. This was the first time he saw him so happy. It turned out that his father, who had always been bald, actually wanted hair as well, but he didn't know about it. It seemed like he wasn't a good son. He should communicate more with him. Charney nodded, helping alopecia patients. Mission progress, 29/30ths. 30/30ths. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at the progress bar. Without the system as a stumbling block, this mission had been completed rather easily. Ding! System learning completed. Download of 1024T resources completed. Host, you are so coquettish. Just then, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 1158. System, I've already completed the mission, Meg said directly, ignoring the resources that the system had secretly downloaded. You actually completed the mission in advance. This is illogical. According to the system's calculations, this mission has a 30% failure rate. How could you have completed it on the first day? The system's surprised voice sounded. Anyway, I've already completed it. Hurry up and give me the reward, Meg said calmly without blushing or skipping a beat. Check complete. The system did not run wrong. The host has successfully completed the hidden mission and restored the confidence of 30 alopecia patients. The reward is a recipe for steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. The system's voice sounded. Meg looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers experience bag that appeared in his mind, and his eyes lit up. The steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers was the classic way to cook fish head, and he liked it very much. He just didn't know what kind of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers could be made from the recipe given by the system. In an elegant tea room in the Buffett Manor, Gloria and the Hill sat opposite each other with a steaming pot of tea between them. Gloria said apologetically, Miss Hill, thank you for taking the time to meet me. It's really rude of you not to make an appointment in advance. She looked at the hill. This woman who was about the same age as her had an aura that did not match her age. She had seen this aura on her grandfather before. However, the hill was not even 20 years old, and she already had the aura of a leader. Perhaps she was born to be a leader? I don't have any plans tonight. Of course, I'm willing to have a cup of tea with you, Miss Gloria. After all, in this huge manor, no one is willing to sit down and have a cup of tea with me peacefully. The hill picked up the teacup and took a sip with a self-deprecating smile. A hint of surprise appeared in Gloria's eyes. This peer of hers, who was already standing in the upper circle of power in Chaos City at such a young age, didn't have a perfect life like others thought. I heard that Cyril wants to kick you out of the board of directors during the Chamber of Commerce's year-end celebration. Are you here because of this? Hill looked up at Gloria and asked. Gloria didn't expect Miss Hill to speak first. She immediately guessed Miss Hill's intentions, but she wasn't too surprised. She nodded slightly and said, Yes, I'm here to see Miss Hill about this matter. I hope Miss Hill can help me. Why do you think I'll help you? Hill rubbed the cup with his slender fingers and looked at Gloria with a mysterious smile. Gloria put down the teacup and looked into Hill's eyes as she said, Compared to Cyril, I think Miss Hill would be more willing to see me as your opponent. Miss Hill faltered slightly, and a hint of interest appeared in her eyes as she looked at Gloria. After staring at Gloria for a while, she nodded with a smile and said, Now, I do have that thought. Cyril has never been on my list of opponents, but now I might consider adding you to my list. Gloria's eyes lit up. Could it be that Miss Hill was really willing to help her? Seeing as we're both businessmen, let's make a deal, Miss Hill continued. What's the condition? Gloria was alarmed. Although she had no choice but to ask for help from Miss Hill, she knew that Family Moreton and Family Moreton were competitors in the Aiden Chamber of Commerce. If Miss Hill got hold of any evidence, or if Miss Family Moreton had to sacrifice their interests, she would never agree to it, even if she was kicked out of the board. I'll ask the Buffett board to vote against it. Of course, I can't guarantee the result. Miss Hill's lips curled up slightly. The condition is that from today onwards, I'll have the right to pre-order a set of clothes from Suede Clothing. As long as it's the set I've ordered, there won't be a second set of the same color. Of course, I'll pay according to the price. That's it. Gloria was stunned for a moment. She still wasn't sure. She didn't expect Miss Hill to propose such a condition. It wasn't related to Family Moreton, and she didn't have to make any promises against her will. She just wanted a set of Suede Clothing in her exclusive color. Although making the red color into a single set meant giving up a more popular color, it wasn't an unacceptable condition. Yes, I don't like to wear the same clothes as others, although it's embarrassing for others if I do. Miss Hill nodded matter-of-factly. I accept this condition. Gloria smiled. In the future, Suede Clothing's new products will be delivered to Miss Hill for you to choose. The color you choose will be the only one. As expected, you're more interesting than Cyril. Shear raised his teacup to his lips and took a sip of tea. Miss Hill, you're also more interesting than the rumors say. Gloria took a sip of tea and smiled. Miss Hill was interested. Oh, I'm curious what the rumors say about me. Moreton Manor, study. Mars looked at Jeffrey, who was sitting behind the desk, and said respectfully, Master, young Master Cyril has been close to Bowen of the Marquis family recently. The directors of the Marquis family have also received notice that they will vote to remove Miss Gloria from her position at the end of the year. So it's Bowen, that sly fox, who's behind this. Otherwise, Cyril wouldn't be so arrogant. That guy, does he really think I'm old? A cold smile appeared on Jeffrey's face as he looked at Mars and said, I'll get the Moreton family's board members to remain neutral in this matter. Do your best to assist Gloria. If she can retain her board member position this time, I'll appoint you to a new position. Mars shook his head. Master, I'll just stay by Miss Gloria's side. I don't need any other position. I'll do my best to assist her. She's a very smart child. I'm sure she'll be able to solve this problem. You can leave now. Jeffrey raised his hand, and Mars left. Looking at his back, Jeffrey said thoughtfully, Did Mars think highly of Gloria from the beginning? To the north of the Goblins' Vic Mountain, near the Wind Forest, was a series of steep mountains. These mountains were rich in gold and gemstone mines. The hard-working goblins had dug out countless mines in the mountains and transported the precious gemstones and gold away, leaving behind many abandoned caves. At this time, among the mountains, near the wind forest, there was a mountain peak. Many elves surrounded the foot of the mountain. Their torches were like a long dragon that surrounded the entire mountain peak. In the middle of the mountain peak, at the entrance of a cave, a figure in white stood alone and looked down. "Princess, we've been besieged for 6 days without any reinforcements. We've run out of food since yesterday. We have to find a chance to break out of this cave and find food. Otherwise, we won't last long," an elf said anxiously. Chapter 11:59. When Irina heard that, her beautiful brows furrowed slightly. Looking at the fire dragon at the foot of the mountain, her expression turned colder. "These fellows are surrounding us, but not attacking. They don't dare to enter the catacombs. Most likely, they know that we lack food. If they want to break through and leave now, a huge battle will definitely break out. With our current strength, I'm afraid we're no match for them. However, if we continue like this, we won't have any rations and we'll be isolated and helpless. In just a few days, we'll be defeated." The elf looked at Irina with a concerned expression. "What should we do, princess? The catacombs are our last line of defense. We can't give up." Irina shook her head slightly. Looking into the distance, she said in a cold voice, "I'll solve the food problem. Tell them not to worry. As long as I'm here, the catacombs won't fall." The elf looked at Irina and said hesitantly, "Princess, the biggest reason why they don't dare to attack now is because you're here. Once you leave the catacombs to look for food, I'm afraid they'll soon invade and destroy the catacombs." Irina pursed her lips. A trace of annoyance flashed across her eyes. Burke and Irina, those two cunning fellows, did not dare to fight her directly in order to preserve their strength. Instead, they resorted to such underhanded means. To the north was the enemy-controlled the Wind Forest. To the south was the goblins' Vic Mountain that refused to let them go any further. In such a desolate place, where could they find food to supply 1,000 elves? Just then, a few loud explosions suddenly came from the foot of the mountain, followed by chaotic screams. "This is—" Irina looked down in surprise. The forest in the northwest suddenly burst into flames. From time to time, huge fireballs exploded in the forest, causing the fire to burn even more fiercely. The torches that were originally surrounding the catacombs also rushed toward the direction of the fire. Soon, gaps appeared. Did someone come to join us again and fight with them? The elf at the side also came forward and said in surprise, "Tell them to guard the catacombs well. Don't attack without my orders." "I'll go take a look," Irina ordered. A green light appeared under her feet and she disappeared. Keel glanced in the direction of the flames and said in a low voice, "Boss has already attracted their attention. Once we take care of those elves, we can drive the carriage through quickly. Be careful. We must be fast and don't make too much noise." The members of the Burning Legion nodded in silence and grabbed the reins tightly. Phyllis held the two books in her hands nervously as she looked at the pitch-black mountain peak. There was a trace of excitement in her eyes. She was about to see the princess again. Keel and Mon glanced at each other and silently walked forward. Simultaneously, they struck the elves with their sticks and threw the unconscious elves into the bushes nearby. "Pass!" Keel waved at the carriages, and the unicorn carriages loaded with food sped along the uneven road. Under the cover of the night, they drove along the rugged path left behind by the goblins toward the underground cavern. "It's a demon?" Alina stood on top of a tree and watched as a black shadow darted out from the forest at the side and ran in the opposite direction. It was a lava demon, and the direction he was running in was the direction of the catacombs. "What is this guy trying to do?" A trace of doubt appeared on Irina's face. There was still a deep hatred between the elves and demons, but the lava demons weren't part of the group that invaded the Wind Forest back then, so this hatred had lessened a lot. Light flashed under her feet, and when she appeared again, she was already in front of the demon. She held her magic caster's staff in front of her and coldly said, "Sneaky, what are you doing?" Sargeras, who was charging forward, suddenly stopped in his tracks. The flames were already rising slowly in his palms. His gaze landed on Irina, and his eyes lit up immediately. The flames were extinguished, and he smiled. "You must be Princess Irina, right? I am Sargeras. I was asked by Mr. Mac to send Miss Phyllis and the food here. Because we discovered that the mountain was surrounded, we set a fire to attract the elves' attention. My brothers should have brought the food and Miss Phyllis through the blockade line by now." "Mr. Mac," Irina murmured softly. Her eyes lit up, and her voice rose a few notches. "You mean Meg asked you to send Phyllis and the food here?" "Yes. You will be able to verify all of this immediately when you see Miss Phyllis." Sargeras nodded. He looked behind him again and said, "Those elves may seal the mountain again very soon, and the night elves in the underground cavern don't know that there are reinforcements sending food here. I'm afraid there might be accidental injuries. Princess, please go back and take a look first." Irina looked at Sargeras. This was an 8th-tier demon, and he posed no threat to her. Besides, Phyllis was around. Whether there was a problem or not, she just had to ask to know. 2 teleportation portals lit up under their feet. With a flash of light, the 2 of them disappeared. On the other side, Keel and Mond led the cavalrymen up the road. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of a cave. They couldn't see anything in the pitch-black cave. "The road above has been destroyed. We can only enter from here," Mond said softly. "It's so dark here. I don't know what's going on inside. The night elves should have set up many traps. What should we do?" Keel looked into the cave and scratched his head. He didn't dare to act rashly. Swish! Just then, an arrow was shot out from the cave. It flew past Keel's head and nailed into the carriage. The tail of the arrow was trembling rapidly. The sound of arrows being knocked could be heard in the cave. In the darkness, there seemed to be countless arrows aimed at them. "Fuck!" Keel touched his cold head and couldn't help but shiver. If he wasn't a little short, he would have been hit. He turned around and shouted to Phyllis. "Miss Phyllis, aren't they on our side? Hurry up and shout for them to stop shooting. They almost accidentally hurt our allies." "I'm fine," Phyllis hurriedly called out. "Shoot!" A cold voice came from the tunnel. At the same time, a series of whooshing sounds could be heard. "Fuck!" Keel and Mond shouted at the same time and jumped to the side. Mark picked up Phyllis, who was standing on the shaft of the carriage, and jumped to the side too. "Freeze!" Just then, a soft shout sounded. A green light screen appeared at the entrance of the cave. Dozens of arrows landed on the light screen, but none of them could penetrate it. The green teleportation portal appeared, and Irina walked out and said to the cave, "Stop. They're on our side." Princess Phyllis, who had just landed, rushed over with reddened eyes. Chapter 1160. Phyllis stopped in front of Irina and looked at Irina with reddened eyes. After not seeing her for a few months, the princess seemed to have lost a lot of weight, and she also looked a little tired. She must have had a hard time during this period of time, and she didn't eat well either. The more she looked at her, the more her heart ached. Phyllis couldn't help but start to cry. Bean sprout. Irina looked at Phyllis with joy in her eyes, but there was also a hint of frustration. Why did that fellow send Irina back? The night elf situation wasn't good now. Phyllis didn't know any magic, and she didn't even have the ability to protect herself in the chaos of war. "You still haven't grown up at all," Phyllis said with a sigh as her gaze stopped at Phyllis's chest. The familiar tone was a blow to her soul, but Phyllis smiled happily. As long as she could stay by the princess's side, she would be happy even if she had to listen to her say these words every day. Sargeras also walked out of the teleportation portal. He took a look at the arrow nailed to the carriage and asked Keel and the rest, "Are you hurt?" "Boss, we're fine. We were just almost hurt by accident." Keel shook his head and touched his head again. The tunnel lit up, and dozens of elves with bows and arrows walked out. The leading elf looked at Sargeras and the rest, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "It's you guys." Isn't this Miss Shirley? Why are you here?" Sardras and the rest looked at Shirley in surprise. Shirley's hair was tied into a neat ponytail, and her clothes had a few holes in them, but they still looked very clean. I heard that Miss Shirley had resigned. I didn't expect you to come here. Mr. Mac asked us to send food to the night elves, Sardras said with a silly smile. Boss! Shirley was slightly taken aback. She looked at the carriages full of sacks and couldn't help but feel warm. She didn't expect him to send so much food over for her. Shirley. Phyllis also greeted Shirley with an excited expression. After all, they had worked together for a period of time. She didn't expect to meet her again here. Phyllis. Shirley also nodded slightly. It was really rare to see an old friend here. Food. All of the elves' eyes lit up with elation at the sight of the fully loaded carriages. They had been eating porridge for a period of time and had completely run out of food since yesterday. They could only rely on water to satisfy their hunger. Now that they had suddenly obtained so much rations, they would not have to starve anymore. Moreover, they could continue to defend the catacombs. So all of you know each other. Irina looked at everyone in surprise, and her gaze lingered on Shirley for a while. This beautiful elf who claimed to be from Chaos City had a 7th-tier power. She was one of the more powerful night elves now, so she was appointed as the captain of a guard team. However, she didn't expect her to have worked as a service staff member in Mag's restaurant. What a beautiful elf. She's only a little worse than me. Yes, Shirley and I used to work in a restaurant in Chaos City. Phyllis nodded. Then, she looked at Sardras and the rest and said, Mr. Sardras and the rest were asked by Mr. Meg to escort me and the food here. He's a frequent customer of the restaurant. After getting Phyllis's approval, Irina looked at Sardras and said, Thank you. We're short of food now. You're welcome, Your Highness. Mr. Mac has already paid us. This is what we should do, Sardras said with a silly smile. He glanced at the wide passageway and said, We can help you move the food in. There's no need for that. We'll carry the rations in ourselves. You guys can just unload the unicorns and leave before they return to defend. It won't be easy for you guys to leave if you alarm the advanced elves. Irina glanced at the torches that were reforming the encirclement. All right, Sardras nodded. Then he looked at Phyllis and said, Miss Phyllis, take care. Thank you, all of you. Phyllis bowed to them gratefully. They had taken care of her throughout the journey, and it had completely changed her impression of demons. The people from the Burning Legion unloaded the unicorns, and the elves took over the carriages that were filled with food. They rushed down the slope in the dark and soon disappeared into the night. Irina retracted her gaze and ordered calmly, Drag all the carriages back. Don't leave any traces behind. The carriages were quickly dragged into the cave. Your Highness, the food has been accounted for. If we save some, this food can last us for 2 months, the guard from before reported with a smile on his face. All right, the food problem has been solved for now. Keep this information strictly. At the same time, continue to strengthen the defense line of the underground cavern. Tighten the defense. Irina nodded with a relaxed expression. How does he know what I lack the most now? Although this fellow doesn't say it, he's pretty good at what he does. The corners of Irina's mouth curled up slightly. Looking at the food, the smile on her face became even brighter. Your Highness, our boss asked me to pass this to you. Phyllis took out a small booklet wrapped in craft paper and handed it to Irina. Pass this to me. Irina's eyes lit up. Then she showed a hint of doubt. Could it be that Meg had already told Phyllis about their relationship? Yes. He said this is a military book and asked me to pass it to you. Maybe it will be useful. Phyllis nodded. Then she added with a smile, Boss is really a good person. Military book? Irina took the booklet and casually flipped it open. She looked at the first page and read, First half, Guidelines for Villages to Surround Cities. What's this strange thing? Irina frowned. She casually flipped to the middle, and her frown deepened. The 36 Stratagems of Sun Tzu's Art of War. Boss is just being kind. Maybe it really will be useful. Phyllis said softly. Although she didn't know any military books, when she heard it, it did seem a little unreliable. Okay, I'll go and study it. Irina nodded. She took the booklet and turned to leave. Phyllis looked around. Her gaze fell on Shirley, who was leading a pair of elves and preparing to continue patrolling. She hurriedly said, "Shirley, wait a minute." Shirley stopped in her tracks and looked at Phyllis, who ran in front of her. Phyllis took out a rabbit woven with thread and handed it over. Smiling, she said, "Anna asked me to pass this to you. She said she will always wait for you to return." Chapter 1161. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Anna. Shirley was slightly taken aback. She looked at the plump rabbit. The workmanship wasn't exquisite. The ends of the thread were exposed, and the eyes and nose were drawn on directly. It looked ugly but adorable. It reminded her of that adorable little person. She didn't know how to knit. She didn't know how long the little girl spent to knit this ugly little rabbit. However, compared to the little rabbit hat he gave her, it was still much better looking. "Thank you." Shirley took the little rabbit and thanked Phyllis gratefully. She then led the elves away. She turned her face away, and a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. It was great that there were still people who thought of her. It was late at night. According to the distance, the Burning Legion should have sent Phyllis to the underground cavern, right? I wonder if Irina can get some inspiration from that military book. Meg stood on the balcony and looked toward the northeast with a hint of worry. His strength had just recovered to level 8. When facing an opponent like the entire elf tribe, he couldn't be a strong help to Irina. Instead, he might bring more opponents to the Night Elves. What he could do was to support the Night Elves with his resources to help them survive the most difficult period of their establishment. With the continuous increase of the restaurant's membership and the promise of the Mermaid Tribe, he could provide Irina with a strong support when necessary. However, such an opportunity would only come once, so he wanted to find the best opportunity. Right now, the most important thing is to recover my strength. Only by being strong can I rely on myself. Meg whispered to himself as he took out his sword and began to practice swordsmanship. 2 hours later, Meg, who was covered in sweat, went downstairs to take a shower. He changed into clean pajamas and lay on the bed. He opened the golden steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers experience bag in his mind. A huge amount of information surged in instantly. Meg digested it for a while and organized the information into his own. Then, he pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery. "Fight, fathead fish." As soon as Meg entered the test field for the god of cookery, a loud voice rang out. A golden Chinese kitchen knife appeared in Meg's hand. Meg was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, a giant fathead fish flew out from the side and flew towards him with its mouth wide open. "What the hell is this?" Meg raised his hand and swung his saber. The fathead fish was cut in half and fell to the ground with a clatter. The fathead fish's head was 2 times bigger than that of an ordinary fathead fish, and its body was rounder. The ratio of its head to its body was about 1-to-1, so it basically had 2 heads. A fat fish with a bare head. At this time, the number 1/10,000 appeared in the upper left corner of Meg's mind. Before Meg could think further, 2 fathead fish flew towards him from both sides. "Hello, system, what are you doing?" Meg asked with a frown as he looked at the number that had become 3/10,000 after slashing 2 fathead fish in 2 slashes. This is an opening game tailor-made for the host based on the host's evaluation of a steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Fight, fathead fish. The host needs to fight against the increasing number of fathead fish as time passes. Once bitten by a fathead fish, all the data will be reset and restarted. Moreover, the fathead fish must be slashed from the middle of its head to be counted as an effective death. The first level, 10,000 fish. Host, do your best. The system's voice sounded with a smile. Fuck. Meg looked at the fathead fish that had turned into 4 and slashed the fathead fish in 2 slashes. Thinking about it carefully, when he ate the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and changsha, because the chef's knife skills were too ordinary and the 2 halves of the head were uneven, he casually complained, "Let the chef go back and slash 10,000 fathead fish before selling them." Unexpectedly, a sentence came true. Sure enough, Sooner or later, one would have to pay for what he did. Slashing the fathead fish, Meg was like a whirlwind as he jumped and circled around the school of fish. Between the slashes, a fathead fish died. It doesn't seem difficult. Meg relied on the physical quality and reaction of a level 8 knight and easily dodged those round fathead fish. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, passing through thousands of trees without touching a single leaf. Ouch! Meg suddenly felt pain in his buttocks. When he looked back, a fathead fish had bitten his buttocks and rolled its eyes at him. Challenge failed. Data reset. A cold voice sounded. No. Meg looked at the data that had reached more than 9,000 instantly and couldn't help but let out a sigh. Then, he slapped the fathead fish away. Another fathead fish flew out from the side. Challenge failed. Challenge failed. Challenge failed. Although he had been failing, the data was steadily increasing. And Meg had gradually become an indifferent fathead fish killer from dodging left and right at the beginning. 300 fathead fish appeared at the same time. Schwa schwa. 2 slashes of the knife flashed, and 200 fathead fish were cut into 2 halves at the same time and fell to the ground. Every fish was perfectly divided. Congratulations to the host for passing the challenge. This time, the system's voice sounded. Meg swung his hand, and the golden kitchen knife flew out and nailed a fathead fish in the corner to the ground. The system's voice suddenly became noisy and only recovered after a while. Now, you can start practicing how to make steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. It's just steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. What's so difficult about it? Meg's face revealed an expert smile. He casually picked up a chili pepper and sniffed it. His face quickly turned red, and then he sneezed a few times. Damn, this chili is a bit spicy. Meg raised his eyebrows. This spicy smell was a bit sudden. Steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. The chopped chili was the essence of the entire dish. How to pickle a qualified chili was also the key to making the delicious steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Therefore, Meg's journey of making steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers started with pickling the chili. The fiery red chopped chili covered the white and tender fish head. Together with ginger, spring onion, garlic, and other ingredients, they were put into the steamer and steamed. When the time was up, he took out the fish head and drizzled it with soy sauce and hot oil. Then, a serving of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers was completed. At first glance, it looked quite simple. But when the requirements of all the steps were raised to the extreme, everything wasn't that simple anymore. Fail! 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 Early the next morning, Meg opened his eyes. The appearance of the fathead fish rolling its dead fish eyes was still reverberating in his mind. Who? Meg let out a sigh of relief. He took a look at the alarm clock at the bedside. It was just 6 o'clock. Today was a rest day, and there was no need to open for business. However, he had to get up and make breakfast for the cleaners. They didn't have a day off. Meg got up quietly. After washing up, he went downstairs and entered the kitchen. He first took a look at the fish tank. A fathead fish was leaning against the side of the tank and rolling its dead fish eyes at him. Fuck, you think I can't deal with you? Meg grabbed the fathead fish, picked up the Chinese kitchen knife on the knife rack, and slashed at the head of the fathead fish. Ding! The kitchen knife broke into 2 pieces at once. The fathead fish that only broke the skin rolled its dead fish eyes proudly. Chapter 1162. Meg looked at the broken knife in his hand, and then at the smug fathead fish. He was stunned, and couldn't help but ask in his heart, System, did you practice the iron head technique with this lousy fish? Don't be impatient. This fathead fish is reared in Lake Karasana in the extreme north of the Northern continent. It's frozen all year round, and there's an extreme lack of oxygen underwater. In order to survive, these fathead fish use their heads to smash the ice surface every day. After smashing through the ice surface, they obtain oxygen. After tens of thousands of years of evolution, their heads are abnormally hard. Hence, they are also known as the icebreaker fish, a level 3 magic beast, the system explained. Why bother when it's a problem that can be solved by moving house? Meg pursed his lips. He looked at the broken knife in his hand and said, "Where's the knife from yesterday? Seems like this gold-rimmed kitchen knife needs to be eliminated. The one I used last night was quite handy. Just give me one." Ding! The system's voice sounded. The broken kitchen knife has triggered a hidden mission. As the god of cookery, you must have a peerless kitchen knife that belongs to you. Please head to Isen Castle, find the best knife forger, and forge your own god of cookery's knife. That works. Meg raised his eyebrows and then shook his head decisively. System, I refuse this mission. I'm a chef. It's already the year 9012. Who would specially go to the dwarves to find a master to customize a kitchen knife? As a professional assistant, is there a need for Dad to make a trip personally for a problem that can be solved with money? Tell me, how much was the kitchen knife from last night? The kitchen knife that Dad used previously is called P. It's a bone-cutting knife that this system specially designed for you. It's made of the highest grade of titanium alloy. The system's flattering voice stopped abruptly. It coughed twice and then said seriously again, "Host, please respect this system. Don't use money to humiliate me. I'm an upright and principled system. For this mission, you must double," Meg said calmly. "Must kiss, triple," Meg continued calmly. "Must go personally, quadruple. Must go personally, go. If you don't want to sell it, then forget it. I don't want to be a dead fish anymore," Mag said nonchalantly as he tossed the fat-head fish back into the bathtub after drawing a perfect parabola in the air. "Wait." The system raised its voice and said with difficulty, "Host, you must go on this mission. The time limit is 3 days. Mission failure. Host will be deemed as looking down on knives and will lose the right to use all the knives in the kitchen. Mission success. Host will obtain a chance to temporarily restore his peak strength." Meg, who was about to turn around and leave, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He asked with some uncertainty in his heart, "System, are you saying that it'll be like the last time, and I'll directly recover to level 10? "Yes, it will take 10 minutes to restore this body to its peak state," the system said confidently. "Isn't 10 minutes too short? If this enemy talks a little more nonsense, I would have fainted in front of him before the fight even started. You know, some villains really talk a lot of nonsense." Meg's eyes lit up, but then he said with a troubled expression, "How about we add more? Villains talk a lot. You can't blame them for that. Otherwise, all the stories of superheroes would become tragedies." The system pondered for a while and said, "But what the host said is not unreasonable, so the system will consider adding another 5 minutes. 15 minutes. Meg thought for a while and nodded. "Okay, I'll accept this mission." Looking at the 3-day countdown that appeared in his mind, Meg began to make the congee with pork and century egg. When the congee was almost ready, Anna came down from upstairs and walked into the kitchen. She looked at Meg and said, "Uncle Meg, let me help you." "Anna, don't wake up so early in the future. Sleep more. It's time for you to grow taller." Meg looked at Anna and smiled. "It's okay. I've slept enough. Uncle Meg woke up earlier than me." Anna shook her head and opened the cupboard. She carefully took out a pile of big bowls and walked out of the kitchen. Meg looked at Anna's small back. This little girl was good at everything, but she was too sensible. So sensible that it made one's heart ache. At 6:30, Meg opened the door on time and took the big pot out. Then, with Anna's help, he distributed the congee with pork and century egg to the cleaners. Seeing that everyone was almost done eating, Meg said loudly, "I have something to tell everyone. I'm going out today and might be gone for 2 or 3 days. So for the next 2 days, everyone needs to bring their own breakfast. I'm telling everyone in advance. I hope everyone doesn't forget." "Mr. Meg, don't worry. We'll take care of it ourselves," Old Jack said with a smile. The other cleaners mostly agreed. "Didn't you say that we have food every day? Why is it gone after 2 days?" Elton muttered. He drank a big mouthful of congee and was a little dissatisfied. This congee was delicious and free. Usually, he would starve every morning. Now he had to stop eating after 2 days. He looked at Mag and rolled his eyes. He stood up with a chuckle and said to Mag, Mr. Mag, we won't have any breakfast after you go out. Why don't we do this? I heard that your congee with pork and century egg is selling for 200 copper coins a bowl. So you can give each of us 400 copper coins for the next 2 days so that we can have our own breakfast. This way, you'll be paying the same price, and we'll be able to eat a hot breakfast. Isn't this problem solved? Hearing 400 copper coins, many of the cleaners raised their heads. That was almost a month's worth of their salary. Although they felt that Elton's way of doing things was a little wrong. After thinking about it carefully, he didn't seem to be wrong. That was 400 copper coins. If they could get it, they could buy a lot of meat. Meg looked at Elton and suddenly laughed. This guy's level of shamelessness was worse than he thought. Elton, you rotten old man, you're very bad. Old Jack stood up abruptly and pointed at Elton angrily as he scolded. Mr. Mag is kind enough to make us breakfast for free. He even woke up early on his rest day just to fulfill a promise. What does he want from you? To pee on your hands or not bathe? Now that he has something to do and has to go out, you're good. Who do you think you are to have the face to ask him for 400 copper coins for breakfast? If you're so capable, why don't you use your face to sweep the floor? Even if you don't want your face, we still do. We can't make such a request. Sitting with someone like you and even drinking this bowl of congee, I feel sorry for Mr. Meg. Yes, Mr. Meg is a great person. Don't worry and go out. We'll take care of our own breakfast. Many of the cleaners echoed. The cleaners who had been tempted earlier all blushed and lowered their heads in shame. Damn, old man, you're ruining my plans again. Elton looked at old Jack sinisterly. Seeing that everyone's thoughts had been beaten back by old Jack's words, and that he had become the target of public criticism, he chuckled and looked at Meg. I was just saying it casually. It was just a joke. Mr. Mac, don't take it to heart. It's all right. From tomorrow onwards, you don't have to come. Meg smiled at Elton. This isn't a joke. Chapter 1163. Elton was stunned. His eyes revealed a trace of panic. He swallowed his saliva and said, What do you mean you don't need to come anymore? It's very simple. From tomorrow onwards, Mamis will no longer provide you with breakfast. Meg looked at Elton with a hint of mockery in his smile. I won't serve you anymore. Elton's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly looked at Meg with a pleading expression and said, Mr. Meg, I was just joking just now. Please don't take it seriously. I promise I won't joke around in the future. Look at how cold the weather is. If I don't eat a hot breakfast, I will freeze to death this winter. Please take pity on me. Anna looked at Elton and then looked at Meg. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. The other cleaners also looked at Meg. Elton had indeed gone overboard. However, they didn't know how Mr. Meg would deal with this matter. I'm sorry. My kindness is limited. I only share it with people I want to share it with. As for you, you're clearly not one of those people. You've already been blacklisted by the restaurant. From now on, my restaurant won't serve you anymore, Mag said in an indifferent voice. There was no room for negotiation. Elton looked at Meg. Seeing that he had no intention of negotiating or taking a step back, it was obvious that he had decided not to give him any more porridge. He was so angry that he threw the big bowl in his hand onto the ground. It smashed into smithereens. He pointed at Meg and scolded jokingly, You hypocrite! You only gave us some porridge for the sake of becoming a scholar. Now you're deliberately finding fault with me and not letting me eat. I will expose your true colors and let everyone know what kind of person you are. I will report you to the city lord. Mag glanced at the smashed bowl on the ground and raised his eyebrows. This fellow was really a piece of shit who wouldn't listen to anything. Elton looked at Mag with a hint of smugness in his eyes. These rich people valued reputation and faced the most, especially for a restaurant owner like Mag. If his reputation was tarnished, it would be difficult for him to do business in the future. He would definitely give in to him, and then he could extort a sum of money from him. Then, he would be able to live comfortably for the next few months. Old Jack wanted to say something, but was pulled back by the old lady. She whispered, Mr. Meg can settle it himself. Don't blindly interfere. He is not someone Elton can extort. Mag looked up at Elton and curled his lips. Smiling, he said, You can sue me wherever you want. That's your freedom. Of course, I will hold you responsible for all the slander and accusations. I have money and time, so I'm not afraid of trouble at all. Elton was stunned. He did not expect Meg to be so stubborn. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and said, "All right, I will go to the city lord's castle to report you." After saying that, he turned to leave. "Hold on. You can go and report me, but you have to compensate me for this bowl that you purposely smashed first. This is a high-quality porcelain bowl from the East. 400 copper coins for one." Meg stopped Elton and pointed at the broken bowl on the ground. 400 copper coins. Elton's eyes widened. He looked at the broken bowl on the ground and then at Meg. He angrily said, "You are extorting me." "Extorting?" Meg laughed. His gaze turned cold, and he raised his voice. "You are picking a quarrel and deliberately destroying other people's property. According to Chaos City's laws, you have to compensate the other party according to the price and bear the corresponding responsibility." I. Elton's gaze was a little panicked. How would he know about the law? He also did not expect Meg to go head-on with him without any intention of backing down. His monthly salary was only 600 copper coins, and he had spent it all on drinking and gambling within a few days. He still owed quite a lot of money. Where would he find 600 copper coins to compensate Meg? "I won't stoop to your level." Elton swung his sleeves, picked up his broom, and turned to leave. "Hey, dirty grandpa, you have to pay for the things you broke. Otherwise, my little fireball will not let you off so easily." Amy's crisp voice sounded from behind. Amy, who had woken up at some point, was standing at the door with a little fireball dancing in her hand. Elton turned back to look at the little fireball in Amy's hand, and his expression changed drastically. He picked up his broom and ran as he shouted, "Someone hit someone! Someone hit a cleaner! Hit someone!" He ran away. "Looks like he's not going to pay. What a terrible choice," Amy mumbled to herself. Amy muttered and then pointed at Elton. A small fireball flew out and chased after Elton. A messy old man carrying a broom and a jumping red fireball chased each other crazily in the Aiden Square, maintaining a distance of about half a meter. "Amy, will he be okay?" Meg turned back to ask Amy. "Don't worry, father. He won't die," Amy assured him. Boom! There was an explosion, and a small mushroom cloud rose in the distance, accompanied by a shrill scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Elton, who was covered in flames, jumped into the cold fountain, and the flames were extinguished. Although he wasn't scalded, the clothes on his body had been burned away by the fire, and the water in the fountain quickly turned black. He shivered and curled up in the water. He didn't know whether to get up or stay down. He was so cold that tears were streaming down his face. What a sin. If I knew this would happen, I would have eaten the free breakfast. Now, I have no breakfast and no clothes. How am I going to survive this winter? When the cleaners saw this scene, they all hugged the big bowls in their hands tightly. These bowls cost 400 copper coins. If one of them was broken, they would have worked for nothing this month. However, no one really sympathized with Elton. Everyone knew what kind of person that guy was. He was always sneaky and didn't sweep the floor properly. His hands and feet were dirty. Now that he had set his sights on Mr. Meg, not only did he not succeed, but he was also punished. He deserved it. Mr. Meg and the little girl are really good. This time, they have completely controlled Elton, old Jack said to the old lady with a smile. Uncle Meg and Amy are the best at dealing with bad people. Anna looked at Meg and Amy and thought to herself, if it were me, I wouldn't know what to do just now. Meg smiled and pinched Amy's face. Then he looked at the cleaners and said, "Everyone, continue eating. There's more in the pot when you're done." He took a broom and swept away the broken pieces of the porcelain bowls on the floor, then threw them into the trash can. He wasn't a saint, so he wouldn't spoil anyone. After breakfast, Meg packed up his things, wrote a notice board, and hung it at the door. "Uncle Meg, are you going on a trip?" Anna looked at the notice board and asked curiously. Chapter 1164. Trip. Gina stood at the side with a puzzled expression. She didn't quite understand the meaning of the word. "Yes, Amy and I are going out." Meg nodded. He turned to look at Anna with a smile and said, "Anna, do you want to come along? Will it be inconvenient?" Anna thought to herself worriedly. She shook her head and said, "It's okay. I'll just go to Big Sister Mia's. ice cream shop. I see. Meg didn't force her. This trip to the dwarves wasn't really a trip, and he didn't know if they would encounter any danger. He then looked at Gina and said in the mermaid language, Gina, we're going out for 2 to 3 days. If you're bored, you can go back to Lantis or find Mia and the rest to play. Gina shook her head. Lantis is too far. I don't want to trouble Elizabeth. I'll just go to the ice cream shop with Anna. All right. Meg nodded. It was indeed quite troublesome to go to the boundless sea realm without a flying steed. Father, where are we going to play? Amy asked curiously as she hugged Ugly Duckling. We're going to a place very far away. Wait for me for a while. I need to get something. Meg turned and went into the restaurant. He went into the kitchen and scooped up the fathead fish that he had slashed in the morning and stuffed it into a small bucket. Then he took out a set of ingredients for steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers from the fridge. He lowered his head to look at the fathead fish swimming leisurely in the bucket and said, Don't think that I can't deal with you. I'll eat you up on the way. I don't have a cleaver, but I have a sword. The fathead fish glared and immediately jumped crazily in the bucket. Meg closed the lid of the bucket. This was a special bucket that he had bought from the system. Even a third-tier magical beast like him wouldn't be able to open it. He was going against this fathead fish. Let's go. We'll go to the ice cream shop first. I have something to tell them, too. Meg went out and locked the door. He held Anna with his left hand and Amy with his right hand and walked toward the ice cream shop. Gina looked around and then jogged forward. She held Amy's little hand and smiled brightly. Meg told Mia and the others that he had to go out for a while and would only be back in 2 or 3 days. Before he came back, the restaurant would be temporarily closed. After that, he left with Amy. After leaving the city, Meg brought Amy up the mountain to find Ozzy. When they were halfway up the mountain, Meg whistled. Ozzy quickly flew out of the cave and let out a cry of surprise. She bent down and rushed towards Meg and the others. Ugly Duckling, which was lying comfortably in Amy's arms, immediately opened its eyes. It looked up, only to discover a gargantuan griffin swooping down toward them. It immediately jumped out of Amy's arms and hid behind her, trembling uncontrollably. Ozzy landed in front of Meg and stuck its head out to rub against Meg's hand. When it saw Amy reach out her hand, it instinctively shrunk its head back. Seeing her stiff expression, it hurriedly stuck its head out and allowed her to rub it. Hello, little Ozzy, Amy said with a smile. She wasn't frightened by the purple-striped griffin's huge size at all. Meow. Ugly Duckling meowed weakly as if it wanted to make its presence known. Ozzy was stunned when it heard the voice. Then it stretched its neck and turned behind Amy. It stung Ugly Duckling, who was hiding behind Amy, and its eyes lit up instantly. Meow. Ugly Duckling was shocked. It hugged Amy's leg and buried its head in her shoe. It didn't dare to raise its head and curled into a ball. Ugly Duckling, you're really a coward, Amy said disdainfully. Ozzy lowered its head slowly and then blew at Ugly Duckling. Whoosh, as if there was a gust of wind, Ugly Duckling rolled back twice and sat on the ground. It looked at the huge head that stuck out in front of it with a dumbfounded expression. The furry head had dazzling purple gold hair, and it was very majestic. Ugly Duckling's eyes darted around, and it didn't dare to move. It looked at Amy for help. Ozzy moved closer to Ugly Duckling and sniffed it with a puzzled expression. It walked to the other side and sniffed it again. Then it blew at Ugly Duckling again. Ugly Duckling turned 2 times in the other direction with its white belly facing up. It rolled its eyes and stuck out its tongue. It didn't move and started to play dead. Meg, who was about to stop Ozzy from hurting Ugly Duckling, stopped what he was doing and looked at Ozzy, who was sizing up Ugly Duckling with interest. What exactly was Ugly Duckling? There were so many customers in the restaurant, but no one had recognized it until now. This really made him curious. Ozzy was a 10th-tier, purple-striped griffin. It usually scoffed at ordinary magical beasts and didn't even look them in the eye. But now it was so interested in Ugly Duckling. This really surprised him. Could it be that Ugly Duckling was also the descendant of some super magical beast? Ozzy moved closer to Ugly Duckling, which was playing dead, and suddenly revealed its sinister teeth. Meow. Ugly Duckling opened its eyes in shock. It raised its paw and smacked Ozzy's head. Then it jumped back into Amy's arms and buried its head in her arms, leaving only half of its butt outside. Kikik. Ugly Duckling only left 3 shallow white marks on Ozzy's head, which made Ozzy laugh hysterically. Amy poked Ugly Duckling's fat, but with a disdainful look, and said, "See, little Ozzy is laughing at you. You're fat and cowardly. Ozzy, here's some meat for you." Meg took out a big piece of beef from his backpack with a smile and threw it into the air casually. Ozzy jumped up and caught it with its mouth. It chewed and swallowed it and landed in front of Meg, wagging its tail vigorously at him. "I only brought 1 piece. Catch it yourself on the way later, and I'll roast it for you." Meg shook his head with a smile and patted its head. He carried Amy and jumped onto the griffin's back and said, "Ozzy, let's go to Isen Castle. Don't be discovered on the way." "Howl!" Ozzy let out a long howl. It flapped its wings and flew towards the west. Meow. Ugly Duckling poked its head out of Amy's arms and looked down. Its eyes immediately rolled around, and it fainted in Amy's arms, making Ozzy laugh at it again. On the way, Ozzy caught a big goat, and Meg roasted it on the spot. He cut 2 pieces for his and Amy's lunch, and gave the rest to Ozzy as a reward. After eating the roasted goat, Ozzy continued to fly towards the west with Meg and Amy on its back. Not long after, an eerie iron castle built between the mountains appeared in Meg's vision. Black steel was embedded between the cliffs and connected to the caves, forming a mountain of china. This was Isen Castle, a kingdom of the dwarves, and also the forging capital of the Norland continent. Ozzy stopped in a valley not far from Isen Castle. Meg carried Amy and jumped to the ground. He patted Ozzy's head and said, "Ozzy, play around here. Don't be discovered by others. We'll only stay here for 3 days at most." Ozzy nodded, and its gaze landed on Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms. "Although Ugly Duckling is a little stupid, it's mine. Little Ozzy, you can't have any ideas about it," Amy said sternly. Chapter 1165. Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was originally a little scared, immediately meowed at Ozzy. It even shook its head and bared its teeth, looking very smug. Phew. Ozzy exhaled a little angrily, but when it saw Amy, it shrunk its head and didn't dare to be rash. "However, when it grows up, I can consider giving you some," Amy said after some thought. "But it can't be too much." Meow. Ugly Duckling's eyes widened, as if it realized that things weren't that simple. "Howl!" Ozzy seemed to have understood Amy's words. It raised its head and meowed happily as it stared at Ugly Duckling expectantly. "All right, let's go to Isen Castle first. Although it doesn't look far, we still have to find the best blacksmith there." Meg waved to Ozzy and then held Amy's little hand as they walked along the valley in the direction of Isen Castle. Ozzy flapped its wings and flew away from the valley that people often pass by. Isen Castle didn't look far in the sky, but in order to prevent being discovered, Ozzy still stopped several kilometers away. It would still take a lot of time to walk all the way there. Amy was tired after walking for a short while. Meg carried her, threw Ugly Duckling into the travel bag behind him, and walked towards the steel castle between the mountains in the distance. Just as Meg was considering whether to rent a bicycle from the system, there was the sound of hooves and wheels behind him. Meg walked to the side of the road and prepared to give way, but the carriage stopped beside him. "Hey, are you going to Isen Castle? Seeing that you have a child with you, do you need us to give you a ride?" In the first carriage, a middle-aged man dressed like a merchant looked at Meg and asked. His gaze lingered on Amy, who had already fallen asleep in Meg's arms for a while. In such cold weather, what was this guy thinking? He actually brought his child out for a walk. If they walked to Isen Castle, the child would probably be frozen to death. Meg looked at the caravan to find that there were a dozen or so horse-drawn carriages, all of which were filled to the brim with goods. The coachmen were all humans, and it appeared that they were merchants from Rodu. The chubby middle-aged man who was greeting them was most likely the owner of this caravan. He had dark skin and appeared to be quite friendly. Thus, Tang Wulin smiled and said, "If it's possible, I'll have to trouble you. All right, come on up. There's charcoal burning in the carriage, so it's warm. Don't let the children catch a cold." Gadala laughed heartily as he lifted the heavy curtains and gestured for Meg and the others to enter the carriage. Meg carried Amy into the carriage, and the warm air blew against their faces, completely isolating them from the cold. The interior of the carriage was very spacious, and there was even a simple bed that could be unfolded near the back. It should be where this merchant usually slept. There was a metal basin in the middle of the carriage with charcoal burning inside. There was a small metal rack above the brazier, and a chicken was being roasted on it. The carriage was already filled with the aroma of roasted chicken. Roasted chicken? As soon as Meg sat down, Amy woke up from the smell. She poked her head out of Meg's arms and stared at the roasted chicken on the rack. "This is not our roasted chicken," Meg said with a helpless smile. The little fellow really didn't forget to roast chicken even when she was sleeping. "It's not ours." Amy looked left and right. Why did he come to this place when he only slept for a while? She looked at Meg strangely and asked, "Father, have we arrived?" "Not yet. This kind uncle said he was willing to give us a ride, so we got on his carriage." Meg shook his head. "Oh." Amy nodded thoughtfully. Then she looked up at Gadala and smiled sweetly. "Uncle, is this roasted chicken yours? Can I have a small bite? The little girl is so cute." Gadala looked at Amy, and his eyes lit up. He smiled as he picked up the roasted chicken and handed it to Amy. "Eat. You can have even 2 bites. Amy, don't simply eat other people's food. Uncle probably hasn't eaten yet." Meg shook his head as he looked at Amy, who was about to reach out to take the roasted chicken. It's okay. How much can a child eat in 1 or 2 bites? Let her eat first. I'll eat the rest." Gadala smiled and waved his hand. The little girl looked crystal clear and was really likable. It was okay to let her have 1 or 2 bites first. "Father, look. Even Uncle said it's okay." Amy retracted her hand and looked at the roasted chicken, then at Meg. "This?" Meg pondered for a while. Seeing that Gadala really didn't mind, he nodded and reminded her again, "You can only have 1 bite." "Okay." Amy nodded happily. Then she reached out to pluck a big drumstick from the roasted chicken. She opened her mouth wide and stuffed the whole drumstick in her mouth. She chewed and spat out the whole drumstick bone, then swallowed it. She nodded in satisfaction. Although it's not as good as Father's roasted chicken, it's still very delicious. "This?" Gadala stared blankly at Amy, who ate the drumstick in 1 bite. He only regained his senses after a while. How could such a young girl eat a drumstick in 1 bite? Even he couldn't do that. Besides, he really hadn't had his lunch yet. This roasted chicken that he had roasted for more than an hour was the lunch he had specially prepared for himself. He would be lying if he said he didn't feel the pinch at all after eating a fat drumstick in 1 bite just like that. "Uncle, can I have another bite?" Amy looked at Gadala with a harmless smile. Looking at this kitten-like cute smile, who would believe that she had just eaten a whole drumstick in 1 bite? Although he was the one who said that just now, according to the way she was eating, if she took another bite, he would only be able to chew on the bones. Gadala took the roasted chicken from Amy's hands and nodded seriously. "This? I think your father is right. Children shouldn't eat too much when they're on the bus. Otherwise, they'll feel uncomfortable on the bus." Meg touched his nose and held back his laughter. "Besides, just a small bite." Amy looked away from the roasted chicken reluctantly. She took out Ugly Duckling from the bag, hugged it, and leaned against Meg. She immediately closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Gadala was stunned as he looked at Amy, who fell asleep instantly. He raised his head and gave Meg a thumbs up. "Your daughter is really a genius. You flatter me." Meg turned his body slightly to let Amy lean on him more comfortably. "Oh yes, I'm Gadala, a merchant from Rodu. Where are you from? What are you going to Isen Castle for?" Gadala asked Meg curiously. This father-daughter pair's attire and salutation didn't look like merchants or wanderers. Instead, they looked like rich people who were out for a stroll. They even brought along a strange-colored kitten. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1166. I'm Meg, and this is my daughter, Amy. We came from Chaos City. The flying steed we took had some problems and left us behind before we reached Isen Castle. Hence, we could only walk there, Meg replied with a smile. It was a half-truth. Amy's reputation was out there now, and she might have acquaintances in Isen Castle. If he were to lie completely, it might attract suspicion and attention. Hence, he might as well be honest. After all, his purpose of coming here was to forge a good cleaver. Godala glanced at Meg in surprise. Being able to take a flying steed from Chaos City to Isen Castle meant that this pair of father and daughter were not wanderers, but rather wealthy people. It was just that their luck was not very good. He smiled and said, I see. Then your luck is really bad. If you didn't meet me, you would have to walk for 2 to 3 hours in such cold weather. Why did you come all the way to Isen Castle? I'm a chef. I'm here to find the best blacksmith to forge a suitable cleaver for me. I wonder if Mr. Godala knows who the best blacksmith in Isen Castle is? Where can I find him? Meg asked. I've been traveling between Rodu and Isen Castle for over 30 years. I spend 3 months in Isen Castle every year. Of course, I know that place like the back of my hand. Godala looked confident, but then he looked at Meg strangely. Although I've never been to Chaos City, I've heard from many of my peers that there are all kinds of races in Chaos City. It shouldn't be difficult to find a dwarf blacksmith to forge a cleaver for you, right? Why did you come all the way to Isen Castle? And you even want to find the best blacksmith? Isn't this too much? Meg looked at Godala, who was looking at him as if he was an idiot, and calmly said, The cleaver forged by the blacksmiths in Chaos City can't meet my requirements. Can't meet your requirements? Is there such a high requirement for a kitchen knife? Godala was still confused. He tore open a drumstick and started eating. He usually used a small knife that he had brought with him when he was hunting on the road. He had bought it from a roadside stall in Isen Castle for 3 copper coins. He had used it for more than 10 years without any problems, unlike Meg, who was so particular about it. Some ingredients can't be cut with a normal kitchen knife, so we can only come to Eisenberg to find the best blacksmith to make the best kitchen knife, Meg said. There's something that a kitchen knife can't cut open? Don't tell me you're a magical beast. Godala was slightly taken aback. Having been a merchant for so many years, he had seen plenty of magical beasts. However, because the caravans would usually have 1 or 2 knights accompanying them as guards, there had never been any mishaps when they encountered low-level magical beasts. Magic beasts did have some tough bones. Even the Death Knight's special longsword might not be able to cut them open. Yes. Meg nodded and continued. Mr. Godala, please tell me about the great blacksmiths in Isen Castle. My purpose for this trip is to bring back the best kitchen knife. It will take more time to ask when we reach Isen Castle later. All right, then I'll tell you. Godala saw that Mag had already made up his mind, so he didn't probe further. If we were to talk about the most famous blacksmith in Isen Castle, it would naturally be the legendary blacksmith. Master Rom, who was already 400 years old, had forged countless world-renowned weapons and left his name on the Norland continent. Among them, the most famous one would be Lord Alex's Tion-Du sword. 300 years ago, Master Rome forged the Tion-Du sword for the ancestor of the Alex family. Later on, that ancestor guarded the northwest of the empire and made great contributions, continuing the prosperous Alex family. Many years later, the Alex family's castle was breached by the allied army of the demons and orcs. The family was annihilated, and almost no one survived. 300 years later, Lord Alex appeared with the Tion-Du sword and became the most powerful person in the Roth Empire's military. He was like a god descending from the heavens and suppressed all the experts on the Norland continent. He slayed dragons and demons and was hailed as the #1 knight. The Tion-Du sword became famous again and was hailed as the #1 sword in the world. Meg was a little surprised that the master who forged the Tion-Du sword was still alive. He looked at Godala, whose eyes lit up at the mention of Alex, and asked with a smile, Does Mr. Godala like Alex a lot? Of course. Is there anyone in the Roth Empire who doesn't like Lord Alex? He is the pride of our empire, and the first knight to be hailed as a dragon slayer. That was him. It was also from him that the people of the Roth Empire no longer feared giant dragons. Godala looked at Meg with a matter-of-fact expression, and then shook his head disinterestedly. Forget it. You won't understand, even if I explain it to a chef like you. Anyway, the things that Lord Alex does are not something you can imagine. All right, then continue to talk about that, Master Rome. Meg held back his laughter and nodded. Apart from the Tion-Du sword, this Master Rome has many other famous works. Those who can reserve a weapon from him are all the most powerful people in the various races. Ordinary people don't even have the right to queue, Godala lamented. In that case, this Master Rome basically represents the highest standard of blacksmiths in Isenglass, right? Meg said thoughtfully. That's right. Go and ask around. Who dares to say that their standard is higher than Master Rome? Godala nodded. He looked at Meg and advised, You, don't even think about Master Rome. You won't even be able to queue up. Moreover, I heard that Master Rome's temper has been getting worse these few years. He has changed a few batches of workers in the shop, and customers who come without an appointment are all chased out by him directly. You'd better not go and get yourself into trouble. I'm afraid I can only go and get myself into trouble if I want to forge the best cleaver. Meg smiled and said, I wonder if Mr. Godala can tell me the location of Master Rome's workshop? Sigh, I've already said that Master Rome will never succeed. He makes peerless weapons. How can he forge a cleaver for you? If you go to him like this, you'll definitely be chased out by his disciples. If you want to find a powerful blacksmith, I can introduce you to a few good blacksmiths who are easy to talk to and powerful. Why do you have to ask for trouble? Godala looked at Meg with a puzzled expression. Meg could tell that Godala meant well, but he still shook his head with a smile and said, Since I'm already in Isenglass, there's no reason not to try. I'll ask Mr. Godala to introduce me to other blacksmiths after I fail. All right, we'll be passing by Master Rome's workshop later. I'll drop you off there. Godala couldn't be bothered to persuade Meg further after seeing how stubborn he was. He'd naturally know if what he said was true after he suffered a little. Godala and Meg talked about the rules and precautions of Isenglass on the following journey. They had a pleasant conversation. Mr. Meg, that's Master Rome's workshop. The carriage stopped at a street in Isenglass. Godala looked at Meg and reminded him seriously, I'm staying at the Tam Inn at the end of this street. If you have any difficulties, you can come and find me. Remember, don't anger Master Tam, or it'll be very troublesome. Chapter 1167. Mag watched the caravan disappear into the distance. He was holding Amy's hand as he looked at the shabby blacksmith shop on the corner of the street. It didn't even have a signboard. It didn't feel like the best workshop in the world at all. Instead, it looked more like a shabby blacksmith shop on the street. Then, his gaze fell on a long line of more than 10 people at the door. There was a small door in the blacksmith shop. It was ajar, and he could hear sporadic clanking sound coming from the door. The line was right outside the door. There were ferocious-looking demons, burly demons, human knights in armor, elves with cold expressions, and goblins with protruding mouths and monkey-like cheeks. They all stood in the line with some hostility, and all of them exuded the aura of powerhouses. Meg glanced at them. Even the weakest elf had the strength of a 7th-tier powerhouse. The rest were mostly 8th-tier and 9th-tier powerhouses. This scene made Meg feel a sense of familiarity. Father, are they waiting in line to eat? Amy asked curiously as she looked at the line. No, they should be waiting to forge weapons. Let's join the line. Meg shook his head and held Amy's hand as they walked to the back of the line. Meg joined the line and immediately attracted the attention of all the customers in front of him. There was a hint of hostility in their scrutinizing gazes. After seeing that Meg was just an ordinary person, there was a hint of mockery in their eyes. I say, what are you doing here? Are you bringing your child out to play? Do you know where this place is? The demon in front of Meg turned around and looked at Meg with an unfriendly expression. His gaze lingered on Amy for a while, and he made a scary face at her. Ha ha ha. Uncle, Your expression is so funny." Amy was not frightened at all. Instead, she laughed happily. Funny. Hadding was stunned. His appearance was enough to make even demon children cry on the spot, let alone ordinary human children. This little brat actually said that he was funny? Wasn't this an insult to his looks? This should be Master Rome's workshop, right? I'm here to ask him to forge a kitchen knife for me, Meg said calmly as he shielded Amy behind him. Even with his current strength, he could easily kill a 7th-grade demon. In other words, he had the strength to fight any one of them. He, who had broken through to the 8th level, had yet to fight with anyone. Kitchen knife? Hadding was stunned. He looked at Meg in disbelief. You mean the kitchen knife you humans use to cut ingredients? Everyone in the group also had a look of surprise on their faces. There was even a faint trace of anger. They lined up here every day in the hopes that Master Rome would one day be kind enough to forge a unique weapon for them, so that they could become renowned powerhouses on the Norland continent. And this guy actually wanted Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for him. Wasn't this an insult to the Master? It was precisely because of these unruly fellows who came to the Master every day to mess around that the Master was getting more and more annoyed with innocent visitors like them. Meg replied calmly. My father's cooking is really delicious. Amy didn't forget to add. Everyone stared at them. This father and daughter pair really didn't know their place at all. Hadding was quite angry at first, but he couldn't flare up when he saw the cute little lowly. He pointed to the front and said, I say, if you want to forge a kitchen knife, you can go to any blacksmith shop. Why did you come to Master Rome's shop to mess around? See, there's a shop that specializes in making kitchen knives and hoes in front. Hurry up and go. Thank you for your kindness, but I have to find Master Rome to forge my kitchen knife. Meg shook his head. He couldn't be bothered with Hadding anymore. He took out a water bottle from his bag and poured a cup for Amy. Then, he tilted his head back and drank 2 mouthfuls. Hadding still wanted to say something. At that moment, the half-closed wooden door suddenly opened, and a young man in his teens came out. He said with a sad face, You guys should leave. Master Rome said that he won't see anyone today. Even if you wait until nightfall, he won't see you. Everyone in the line was instantly disheartened. Little Master, is Master Rome in a bad mood again today? The orc at the front of the line whispered. The young man looked back inside and whispered with a sad face, Master has been in a bad mood for the past 2 years. You guys shouldn't come. Anyway, Master hasn't finished his work, so he definitely won't forge weapons for you guys. Everyone looked disappointed and began to disperse. Although they had experienced the same thing many times, it seemed like their hopes were getting dimmer and dimmer. Sigh, looks like I can only come back tomorrow. Hadding sighed. He was about to leave when he saw Mag putting away the kettle and walking to the front of the line. Hey, why are you still walking to the front? He asked in bewilderment. Master Rome already said that he won't see any guests. If you guys leave, maybe he'll see me. Meg smiled. He only had 3 days. Although it seemed that Master Rome had a strange temper and wasn't easy to get along with, he still had to give a try. Hadding sneered. Do you really think you're good-looking? Master Rome has rejected many 10th-tier powerhouses' requests. You're just a kitchen knife, and you still want to ask him to help you? Let's not talk about anything else. You should know Alex, right? He was the one who rode on a griffin and flew in the sky. He could even slash 2 giant dragons while he was at it. His sword was made by Master Rome. You want to use the same kitchen knife as Alex? The customers who hadn't walked far away also began to laugh as they looked at Mag with mockery. This fellow was really daydreaming. How could a chef ask Master Rome to forge a cleaver for him? What a joke. How long has it been since Master Rome took a normal order? Meg didn't care about Hadding's mockery and the other's mockery. Hadding looked at Meg, who was calm and didn't seem angry at all. The mocking smile on his face disappeared. He thought for a while and said, It's been more than a year. I heard that Master Rome was very kind. Although he didn't take many orders, he was very kind to his apprentices and customers. But in the past 2 years, his temper has become worse and worse. I heard that he has changed 3 batches of apprentices, and he doesn't treat customers well at all. Hadding seemed to feel that he was being too kind to Meg. He put on a stern face again and sneered. Anyway, you're dreaming if you want Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for you. You might even be beaten up by his apprentices and thrown to another street. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Hadding turned and left. The other customers left soon after. Meg tidied his clothes and walked forward with Amy. He looked at the waiter who was about to close the door and said with a smile, "Young master, can you tell him that I'm a chef from Chaos City, and I want to ask Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for me?" Chapter 1168. Ugh, a cleaver? The dwarf waiter was stunned for a moment. Although he had only followed Master Rome for half a year, he had to receive many customers who came because of his reputation. He had heard many strange requests, but this was the first time he had heard of a kitchen knife. "Yes," Meg nodded and added, "it's the cleaver that chefs use to cut ingredients. Master Rome said that he won't see any customers today, and he won't accept any orders. Please go back." The clerk shook his head. This human chef probably didn't understand the situation. Usually, the customers who came to the master were all experts. They came to make weapons, but this human chef asked for a cleaver. "Please let him know," Meg insisted. The clerk looked at Meg's determined eyes, thought for a while, and nodded. "Okay, I'll let him know for you, but don't expect too much." "Thank you." Meg nodded. The clerk turned and went in. The inside of the weapon shop looked much more spacious than the outside, but there was no light. There were only 2 dim wall lamps, which made the interior look a little dim. A young blacksmith in his teens was standing in front of the stove, waving the heavy hammer in his hand and hammering the red iron into a flat shape. A white-haired dwarf old man was sitting on an iron stool in front of the stove. The pipe in his mouth had burned out, and his eyes were staring at the dancing sparks in the stove. "Master Luomu." The shop assistant went forward and called out cautiously. The old man was stunned for a while before he looked up. His red nose was flat, and he frowned. He said impatiently, "What's the matter? Haven't those annoying guys left yet?" "No, they've already left. But there's a chef outside who says he's from Chaos City. He wants you to make a cleaver for him, so he asked me to let you know," the clerk said hurriedly. He stole a glance at the master's expression and felt that he was going to be implicated by that guy at the door. A cleaver. Master Rome was obviously stunned for a moment. He seemed to have thought of something and raised his voice. "You mean there's a guy outside who wants me to make a kitchen knife for him?" Cold sweat began to form on the young man's forehead. He suddenly regretted his decision to ask for a kitchen knife for that guy. He might lose the opportunity to continue working in Master Rome's workshop. However, Master Rome stared at him, so he had no choice but to nod. I started learning how to forge at the age of 5 and stopped making kitchen knives and hoes at the age of 8. In these 400 years, I can't even count the number of weapons I've made, and all of them are called divine weapons. Now, someone actually wants me to make a kitchen knife? Do you think I'm dying?" Master Rome kicked over a metal rack at the side, and the metal rack that was filled with unfinished weapons fell to the ground with a loud thud. The blacksmith apprentice slowly put down the hammer in his hand and looked worriedly at the shop assistant. The shop assistant panicked and said in a trembling voice, I'll go get him a leave now." "No need. Get out of here, all of you," Master Rome shouted angrily. "Yes," the shop assistant and apprentice answered. They didn't dare to clean up the mess on the ground and hurried towards the door. Meg, who was standing at the door, could clearly hear the commotion inside through the half-closed door. He felt a little guilty when he saw the 2 shop assistants hurrying out and closing the door. "You can go now. Master Rome won't see you." The shop assistant looked at Meg with a complicated expression, then left with the other shop assistant with a depressed expression. The 2 of them looked a little lonely. "Father, why are they unhappy?" Amy asked, puzzled. They were scolded by their master because of father, so they might lose their jobs. Meg looked at the 2's backs and felt that he should find an opportunity to make it up to them. When the 2 disappeared at the end of the street, Meg withdrew his gaze and looked at the old workshop. "System, do I really have to find Master Rome to forge this kitchen knife? Is it possible to change it to an advanced blacksmith?" Meg asked in his mind. Master Rome is the #1 blacksmith in the world. His forging skills are unparalleled. Only a kitchen knife forged by him can achieve the effect of cutting through anything. It is also a good kitchen knife that will accompany the host for a lifetime. Therefore, the host must ask Master Rome to forge a kitchen knife for you in order to complete the mission. The system replied, "System, this mission is unreasonable." He looks down on the forging of a kitchen knife. "This is an impossible mission." Meg objected. "On the road to becoming the god of cookery, you will encounter all kinds of troubles. I hope the host can take the initiative to overcome them. Good luck." The system said encouragingly and then disappeared. Fuck. Mag rolled his eyes. He fell into deep thought as he stared at the tightly shut door. In the blacksmith shop, Rome looked at the mess on the ground and sighed deeply. He lay back in the chair and looked at the fire in a daze. He had never left this workshop in his life. At the age of 5, he learned forging from his father. At the age of 6, he was able to forge the best kitchen knife and hoe in Isen Castle. At the age of 8, he began to forge weapons. From then on, he was unstoppable. The Tian-Du sword was forged for a knight who came from afar when he was 20 years old. It took him an entire year to forge the sword. As for the young knight, he held that sword and roamed the humans' northern territory with disdain. He established great meritorious deeds and killed many powerhouses. He also attracted the attention of the world and became a famous smithing master. In the following hundreds of years, weapons were forged from his hands and became the killing weapons in the hands of many powerhouses. His reputation became more and more famous. 10th-tier powerhouses lined up to ask him to forge weapons. The nobles of various races lowered their noble heads and begged him to forge a weapon. Even during the years of racial chaos, he still didn't leave his workshop. He immersed himself in forging and gave those powerhouses one powerful weapon after another. He made a name for himself on the Northern continent and also became the #1 blacksmith. He did not know what he wanted, but he enjoyed the feeling of being immersed in forging. He was even more obsessed with the feeling of accomplishment when he saw the divine weapons being forged. But 2 years ago, when he woke up one morning, he suddenly could not remember what he had done yesterday. He even forgot how many times he had hammered the sword and how many processes he had gone through. It was unquestionably fatal for a blacksmith. He could no longer complete the forging of a weapon alone, but he was not willing to expose this to anyone. So, he started to become irritable. He chased away his most familiar disciple, stopped accepting new orders, and did not hand in a weapon for 2 years. His 400-year-old life seemed to be coming to an end. Rome knew this, but he was unwilling to admit it. He was willing to collapse on his forging table one day. He did not want to die in a daze like this. Chapter 1169. Borrow a Knife? The soft voice woke Rome up from his thoughts. He glanced at the small window in the corner and realized that it was already dark. Who wants to borrow a knife? A little girl? Strange. Rome frowned and slowly stood up. He picked up the jug of wine and took a big gulp, then walked towards the door. Although he had gradually lost control of his emotions in the past 2 years, the older he got, the harder it was for him to refuse children. Rome opened the door and saw a little half-elf girl about 4 or 5 years old standing at the door. She looked like she was carved out of jade, and she was looking up at him. "Little girl, why are you knocking on the door?" Rome tried to keep his voice as low as possible, for fear of scaring the cute little girl. "Old Grandpa, can you lend me a knife? My father and I came from a very, very far place. We don't have a place to live or eat, so we can only cook for ourselves. But we forgot to bring a kitchen knife, and we can't even cut the big, stupid fish open." Amy looked pitifully at Rome. Rome looked in the direction Amy was pointing. There was a fire in the open space opposite the forge, and a young human man was standing next to it. He was looking at them with a smile, and there was a big bag at his feet. "I don't have a kitchen knife here. Little girl, you can go somewhere else to borrow one." Rome shook his head. He wasn't lying. He really couldn't find a kitchen knife in his forge. But everyone else's forge is closed. "Old Grandpa, can you lend us a knife?" As long as we can cut open that big stupid fish, we'll be fine. Amy looked at the pitch-black street and shook her little head. Meg, who was standing next to the fire, was also looking at Rome. The old dwarf still looked strong. His thick arms were almost as thick as an ordinary person's waist, which made him look like a square. His white hair and wrinkled face proved his age. Judging from the average lifespan of dwarves of 400 years, this Master Rome was indeed very old. However, he looked quite kind when he was talking to Amy. He didn't look like he was yelling at the shop assistant just now. Rome looked around. The shops on the street were indeed closed. Dwarves loved wine, and most of them went to the tavern to drink at night. It wasn't easy to find another place with people around to borrow a knife. Meg walked up and looked at Rome. Hello, I'm Meg. My father and daughter came all the way from Chaos City to ask Master Rome to forge the world's best kitchen knife for us. Because of my reckless behavior earlier, I offended Master Rome and implicated the two little brothers. I'm sorry, and I apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. You're the guy who wanted me to forge a kitchen knife for you. Luo Mu frowned with anger on his face. He raised his voice and said, I'm a weaponsmith. I only forge weapons for combat. I've never forged kitchen knives. Please go back. I won't forge a kitchen knife for a chef. Master Rome, as a chef, I think the battle between a chef and ingredients is better than the battle between a knight and a magic beast. No knight will peel off a magic beast's skin or split open the hardest bones in a battle just to find the most delicious part and present it to the diner, Meg said firmly as he looked at Rome. A chef is just a chef. Do you want to fight a magic beast like a knight? Rome sneered. He didn't agree with Meg's ridiculous point of view. This is a third-tier magic beast, fathead fish. I want to use it to make a delicious steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. I have 100 ways to kill it, but my kitchen knife can't split its head open. So, I brought it from Chaos City to Isen Castle to find a kitchen knife that can split its head open, Meg said as he took out the bucket and pointed at the fathead fish inside. Rome was stunned as he looked at the fathead fish that was banging its head against the lid of the bucket. Judging from the demon aura, this was indeed a third-tier magic beast, and its big head that took up almost half of its body should be the hardest part of its body. Without a suitable weapon, it would not be an easy task to split open the head of such a magical beast. However, Rome looked at Meg with a frown and said, Isn't a fish just eating its flesh? I've never heard of anyone eating a fish head. Even if you split its head open, are you going to eat the things inside its head? A properly cooked fish head is much more delicious than the flesh. Wouldn't it be a pity to give up such a delicious dish? Meg shook his head and said to Rome, Master Rome, why don't we make a bet? You lend me a knife to split open the head of this fathead fish, and I'll cook a dish with the fish head as the ingredient. You can taste it later. If you think it's delicious, you can make a kitchen knife for me. If you don't, I'll leave Isen Castle immediately. What do you think? Grandpa, my father's dishes are really super delicious. Amy looked at Rome and then touched her stomach. She pitifully said, I'm so hungry. Meow. Ugly duckling stared at the fathead fish in the bucket and swallowed its saliva. Its eyes were already glowing green. That fathead fish seemed to have sensed a terrifying threat and stopped all its movements. It slowly turned around to look at Ugly Duckling and then dodged to the other side of the bucket. It looked at Ugly Duckling in horror. A bet? A hint of hesitation appeared on Rome's face. He looked at the fathead fish in the bucket and then at the expectant Amy. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded and said, All right, I'll bet with you. But don't be happy too early. I'm quite picky when it comes to food. Meg's face lit up. Since it's about food, no matter how picky your mouth is, I can make you shut up and focus on eating. Rome turned around and went into the kitchen. He casually picked up a half-finished long sword from the ground and walked out and threw it to Meg casually. Meg caught the long sword agilely. The black long sword was quite light in his hand, but it looked like it wasn't completed yet. The patterns on the hilt and body of the sword hadn't been carved yet, either. However, even if it was only a half-finished long sword, it could still be considered a good sword. Good sword. Thank you, Master Rome. Please wait for a moment. Meg cupped his hand slightly and walked towards the fire with the sword and bucket. Putting down the bucket, Meg used snow to wash the longsword. Then he opened the lid and grabbed that fathead fish. Looking at the fathead fish struggling in his hand, he chuckled and said, "Continue to jump." Chapter 1170. The fathead fish struggled crazily in Meg's hands. Its head, which was made of iron, shook crazily as it tried to break free from Meg's hands. However, Meg's hands were like iron pliers clamping it firmly. No matter how much it struggled, he picked up the black longsword, and with a swing of the sword, the fathead fish was already split into two from middle. This knife technique, Rome, who was originally a little conflicted about letting a chef use the weapon that he had forged to kill fish, had his eyes lit up. The clean and neat knife technique cut the third-grade big fish into two halves. The clean cut, the almost identical two halves of the fish, and the internal organs were evenly distributed on both sides without any damage. Even the experts from various races who usually lined up outside the shop would not be able to do this if they were asked to do it. After the internal organs were removed, the longsword was flipped and the fine scales flew off. In the blink of an eye, the whole fish had already become a fish head that was evenly split into two halves on the plate. Mag cut off a small section of the fish tail. Because this fat head fish's body was very short, and its meat was very succulent, there was still a section of meat left under the fish head. The utilization of the whole fish was very high. This is probably the fathead fish that was specially made for the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, right? Meg looked at the small half of the fish tail in his hand. He used a bamboo stick to string it up and then put it directly on the fire to roast. This was Ugly Duckling's dinner. After removing the gills, he made a few cuts on the meat of the fish. Then he added cooking wine, pepper, salt, and other condiments, rubbed it evenly, and put it aside to marinate. He took out the marinated chili and pickled ginger that he had bought directly from the system from his bag and chopped them on the small chopping board that he had brought with him. Then he poured a little cooking wine into a small plate for later use. He sliced the ginger and chopped the green onions into sections and laid them at the bottom of the big flat bowl. Then he placed the marinated fish head on top and placed the bright red chopped chili on the fish head. There was a steamer on the fire, and the water in the steamer was drawn from the well not far away. The fire soon boiled the pot. Meg put the plate with the fish into the steamer, covered the lid, and let the fish steam in the pot. Then he just had to wait for it to be ready. Rome walked to the bonfire and looked at Meg in surprise. He was never a person who knew how to cook for himself. He was used to drinking strong wine and eating a large piece of meat in the tavern to fill his stomach. He had never watched someone cook so seriously and closely. Mag's cooking was different from the crude and simple way he had imagined. The way Mag focused on cooking was better than any of the outstanding blacksmiths he had seen before. Mag was calm and confident, and his movements were smooth and fluid. His focused look made the people around him hold their breaths, afraid that they would disturb his wonderful performance. Meg flipped the fishtail over and raised his head. He was surprised to see Rome by the bonfire. He smiled and said, "Master Rome, please wait a moment. It will take some time before the pot is ready." "Yes." Rome coughed softly to hide his awkwardness. He didn't think he would lose this bet. After all, it was up to him to decide if this dish suited his taste. In the empty space in front of the forging workshop at the corner of the street, the old dwarf, the young chef, and the young half-elf gathered around the bonfire, waiting for the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers to be ready. Meanwhile, Ugly Duckling looked up at the fishtail and swallowed its saliva subconsciously. The aroma of the grilled fish had already started to spread. It was a smell that cats would be addicted to. Meg picked up the bamboo skewer and spun it around to make sure the fishtail was done. He was ready to pluck it for Ugly Duckling. "Father, let me taste it for Ugly Duckling first," Amy said as she came forward with an expression of offering her body for her beloved pet. "Meow." Ugly Duckling quickly shook its head at Meg. A smile appeared on Meg's face. This little fellow was really gluttonous. She didn't even let go of Ugly Duckling's food. He looked at the small fishtail in his hand, broke off a small piece, and passed it to Amy. Then, he put the rest in front of Ugly Duckling. Meow. Ugly Duckling meowed at Meg gratefully. It picked up the fishtail and dashed up the big tree at the side. It sat on the tree branch and ate its dinner. Amy put the fish in her mouth and chewed. Her eyes lit up, and she said, "Although there's no salt, it's still delicious." Then, she looked at Ugly Duckling, who was sitting on the tree branch. As if it felt Amy's gaze, Ugly Duckling turned around slowly and faced her with its butt, pretending not to see her. "All right, that's Ugly Duckling's dinner. Let it eat." It wasn't easy on the road, Meg said with a smile. He took out a packet of rice noodles from his bag and put it aside as he looked at the steaming pot that was filled with white steam. "You'll be fat to death." Amy glanced at Ugly Duckling and also looked at the steaming pot. After steaming for about 10 minutes, Meg took down the steaming pot and took out the fish head. He sprinkled some chopped green onions and drizzled a spoonful of soy sauce. He heated up the oil and poured it on top. Sizzle, a beautiful sound sounded. The hot chopped chili spread all over the fish head. The oil droplets jumped, and the hidden delicious taste was ignited at this moment. The fiery red chopped chili covered the white and tender fish head meat, and the steaming aroma wafted over. Gulp. Rome's throat moved, and a hint of surprise appeared on his wrinkled face under the light of the fire. There was a glimmer in his eyes. What a wonderful aroma. Is this really the aroma of fish? The warm feeling is wafting over. It makes one want to avoid it, but they can't help but go forward. It's too amazing. Rome looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers in disbelief. His heart was already in turmoil. His stomach started growling uncontrollably, and it made him blush. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. Since his stomach was growling, everything would be easy. He set up the steaming pot over the fire again and changed it to a pot of clear water. "Master Rome, please sit here. There's only one fish to serve tonight." Meg picked up the fish head and walked to the simple table and chair that the elderly usually used to bask in the sun. He put down the fish head and invited him. Amy had already jogged over and climbed onto the chair obediently. "Since I've already agreed to the bet, then I'll take a bite," Rome thought to himself as he walked to the small table. "Please try it." Meg passed a pair of chopsticks to Rome. Rome took the chopsticks, glanced at Meg, and then picked up a piece of chopped chili and put it into his mouth. "No!" Meg wanted to stop him, but it was too late. "Oh!" Rome's face suddenly turned red, and the sour and spicy taste exploded on the tip of his tongue. His entire tongue almost didn't belong to him anymore. The hot and spicy feeling spread from the tip of his tongue to all parts of his body. The surrounding chill suddenly disappeared, and fine sweat appeared on his forehead. "Phew!" Rome exhaled. After eating the chili, he felt as if his entire body had been cleansed. "You should be eating fish." Meg only managed to finish the rest of his sentence after that. Chapter 1171. Rome felt refreshed after eating a mouthful of chopped pepper. The burning sensation on his tongue gradually disappeared, and the sour and spicy taste was quite special. Meg peeled off the red chopped pepper with chopsticks, revealing the white and tender fish meat underneath. He said to Rome, "This is the fish head." "Of course I know it's the fish head. I just want to taste it," Rome said calmly, and then put a piece of fish meat into his mouth. The sour and spicy taste of chopped pepper was the first to bloom. He had already eaten a piece of chopped pepper before, so he didn't find it strange or hard to accept. The slightly weaker taste made him savor the taste more carefully. The soft and glutinous fish meat was fatty, but not greasy, spicy, and delicious. The unique cooking method of steaming locked the freshness of the fish head firmly in the meat, and the sour and spicy taste of chopped pepper completely permeated the fish head from top to bottom. The delicious taste bloomed from the inside out. It was so delicious. Rome felt like a fireball exploded in his mind, turning into gorgeous fireworks. His scalp tingled slightly, and it was a very wonderful feeling. Vaguely, he suddenly remembered something. The morning before yesterday, he lost his temper at his two apprentices for no reason, and then drank the water that he had rinsed his mouth with. At noon yesterday, he tried to forge the sword that had been put away for more than a year. After swinging the hammer a few times, he fell asleep with the hammer in his arms. When he woke up, he forgot what he wanted to do and lost his temper at his two apprentices again. Many things that he had forgotten flashed through his mind. His scalp tingled slightly, but he felt that his mind was getting clearer and clearer, as if a layer of fog was gradually dispelled. Have I been living such a bad life? Rome looked at these pictures with some depression. He hadn't examined his behavior for a long time. Since 2 years ago, when he forgot what happened yesterday, he began to become irritable and suspicious. He drank every day and used his anger to cover up his embarrassment and maintain his identity as a blacksmith master. After eating a mouthful of fish meat, he almost recalled his life in the past month. It could only be described as terrible. He was no longer the person who was extremely strict with his words, actions, and skills. Rome's mood was very complicated. He never thought that one day he would become such a person. But why would I suddenly think of these things? Rome was stunned. Although these were things that happened to him, he had been forgetting about them since 2 years ago. However, he just recalled the things that he had forgotten in the past month. Could it be? Rome opened his eyes and looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers on the big plate in front of him. He had only eaten a mouthful of fish meat. Could it be related to this fish head? With a suspicious attitude, Rome picked up another piece of fish head meat and put it into his mouth. The smooth and delicious taste was still wreaking havoc in his mouth, but Rome's attention wasn't on it. The slight numbness in his scalp continued, and more images appeared in his mind. The timeline kept moving backward. His eyes gradually widened, and a coherent memory once again appeared in his mind. It was so clear. The things that he had lost for 2 years were actually back at this moment. This feeling was beyond anything for him. After swallowing the fish meat, Rome looked at the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers in surprise. Even his voice was trembling. This fish meat can clear my mind and make my memory more coherent. It has such an effect. Meg was also a little surprised. It seemed that this fathead fish did not grow a big head for nothing. However, seeing Master Rome so excited, could it be that he had been troubled by his mind not being clear before? Rome carefully picked up another piece of fish meat and put it in his mouth. He savored the taste of the delicious taste on the tip of his tongue, and then he accepted the gift of memory. He had completely forgotten about the idea of only eating one bite. Whether it was the extreme taste of the fish head or the magical discovery of the continuous recall of memory, he was immersed in it. It seems like Grandpa likes it very much. I want to try it too. Amy was holding a small bowl. She extended her small hand and picked up a piece of fish meat from the plate and put it in the small bowl. Then, she leaned forward and took a bite. Wow! Amy's eyes lit up. The spicy and sour fish meat was soft and tender. It was simply too delicious. Meg saw that the two of them were eating happily, so he also picked up his chopsticks and put a piece of fish meat into his mouth. The spicy and sour taste of the chopped chili was just right. It was not as hot as the spicy grilled fish, nor was it as sour as the pickled cabbage fish. The perfect spiciness made the spicy taste of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers look gentle and elegant, but it also had an intoxicating charm. The fish meat was soft and springy. The perfect heat control made the taste of the fish meat just right. It would have been overcooked if it had been too long, but it would have been too tender if it had been too short. After swallowing the fish meat, it turned into a warm current that warmed up his body. The slight numbness on his scalp made his mind clearer. Only this kind of steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers is qualified to be called the real steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. A smile appeared on Meg's face. It was not in vain that he had chopped the fathead fish for an entire night in the test field for the god of cookery. When they were halfway through the meal, Meg stood up and threw the rice noodles into the boiling soup pot. Then he sat back down and continued eating. The three of them ate heartily. Soon, the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers was only left with a few big fish bones and a plate of chopped chili. Finished eating, Rome reached out with her chopsticks and flipped through the chopped chili. She could not find any more fish meat, so she put her chopsticks away reluctantly. I feel like I can still eat another fish. Amy picked up a piece of chopped chili and put it in her mouth. She smacked her lips and did not feel any spiciness at all. Wait a moment. There's still rice noodles. Meg stood up and scooped 3 bowls of rice noodles. He sprinkled some chopped green onions on them, then scooped a few spoonfuls of red soup from the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and poured it over the rice noodles that had just come out of the pot. He handed a bowl to Rome. Rome hesitated for a moment and reached out to take the bowl of rice noodles. The white rice noodles were sprinkled with red soup, and a few chopped green onions were sprinkled on top. The aroma was already assailing their nostrils. The soup of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers is also one of the essences of this dish, Meg said with a smile. He slurped down a mouthful of rice noodles. The smooth rice noodles were soaked in the soup of the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. It was sour and delicious. Rome looked at Meg, who was eating happily, and also took a mouthful of rice noodles. Oh, Rome, who was not looking forward to it, had her eyes lit up. The fish soup did not have a fishy smell. It was sour and delicious. Coupled with the smooth rice noodles, she slurped it into her mouth. One mouthful after another, it was so delicious that she could not stop eating. How could ordinary noodles become so delicious after 2 spoonfuls of fish soup? This guy, is he a genius? Rome put down the empty bowl in her hand and looked at Meg in amazement. Her previous prejudice against chefs had completely disappeared. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.